Hello there! Welcome to the ReZero podcast. I'm your host, Wolf. Today, we are going to be discussing and analysing Arc 7, Phase 5B of the ReZero web novel. Me and my wonderful co-hosts will be getting straight into this. But first, introduce yourselves, gentlemen.
I am your host, Gold.
I am your host, Connor.
Yeah, and I'm happy to be doing the B side of this volume with all of you today. Coming off the last one, I would say that we're all in a much more jovial mood to be discussing ReZero, which I will admit last episode probably was only good for the speculating rather than the talking about the chapter part, because we weren't very interested in doing the last part at all.
Yeah, I've not ever made it a secret that the beginning of Phase 5 is probably my lowest point in Arc 7. If maybe only above where we do the unnecessary recaps of scenes that we already understood how they happened earlier.
Yeah.
But this second half, it literally, when I was going back to try and catch up, I think like a little bit over a year ago, once I got to these chapters, I didn't stop reading until I finished Arc 7.
Wow.
In any free time I had. These got me so excited for it and gave me kind of everything I was missing. And I didn't realize how much just having any of the characters that I was familiar with or cared more deeply about, like Flop, really just made that difference for me.
Yeah, because I understand that mentality a lot with, like, especially like the binging part. Because, so for context for the viewers, me and Gold here, we actually read the phases for these episodes like week by week for the episode. We don't like binge ahead and get a head start on it. So we're kind of taking it very slowly. But whilst that really helps in terms of like speculation and discussion elements, it is painful for me as a reader because I want to binge this shit so bad. I'm not gonna lie. This half of the phase was really exciting to read, really fun lore stuff, world building stuff, some fun characterization, and I would honestly say some really cool fights and some really like nice like fluid writing from Tepe. I felt like the pacing for these chapters just felt so much better than the first half of this phase.
Yeah, absolutely. It felt like, because I think part of it is just in the way that the scene shifts around is similar to the first half of this phase, where we are getting none of the chapters follow one thing the entire way through. We get different perspectives and different character views throughout it. But in this one, we cut away just to get something more relevant for what else was going on. Like, for example, in the midst of the fight where the C squad is getting assaulted by Madeline, and all of a sudden Schultz jumps in the way and protects everyone, we cut away to get more context for what's going on there and to set up how that scene progresses once Priscilla shows up there.
Yeah. It's I think one thing these chapters do a really good job of that I think may have been, now I think about it, one of my major issues with the pacing of the first half is that even though we switch between characters in all of these chapters, there is a very clear focal point for each chapter. Even if we cut away to different points, there is like one major through line and then the other through line leading to another major through line for a chapter after or chapter after that. It doesn't feel like I'm focusing on 3 big bullet points in the same chapter, if that makes any sense.
Exactly. And let's not bury the lead here. Our favorite characters are back, even if it's not like our top favorite characters, but yes. Our Amelia camp, the familiar people, they have shown up. They are here in Volakia. That's enough, Amelia says, referencing Reinhardt in Arc 1.
Yep.
She's on the scene. Otto's on the scene. Everyone else is making their way in. We're back, baby. It's time for our full ReZero cast to all be here in Volakia with our 70 new characters.
I am so excited. I think some of the the interactions between Amelia and Priscilla really proved to me that I think one of the major contributing factors to me having a lot of hope for the future of the story is seeing all of these new characters and characters we've heard of interact with all of the Amelia camp. Like, because even just seeing like an extension of Amelia and Priscilla's interactions from what you've seen in Arc 5, because of Amelia's growth, there's just so much good dialogue here that I'm just like, man, I want to see the Amelia camp talk to Olbar. I want to see the Amelia camp talk to Flop. I want to see the Amelia camp talk to everyone.
Yeah, you beat me to what I was going to ask, but before we really get into the chapter, now that we are in this scenario, I wanted to ask both of you of which interactions are you either most excited to see or really hope we get to see between all of these new characters that we have and our existing characters from the Amelia camp, and as mentioned as a possibility from Anastasia's camp as well.
Ooh. I'm gonna answer first here, and these may be like some strange, like you'd think initially strange choices, but these are just ones I really desperately want. I want to see a lot of Otto and Abel stuff. I think those two characters interacting is going to be really interesting, because instead of like the more like hopeful, like revenge against the world Flop sort of stuff we get with him and Abel, we're instead going to get cunning politician versus cunning merchant / prime minister of the Amelia camp. And I think that may set off some vibes for Abel, especially with his relationship with his previous prime minister. So I'm curious to see their interactions. I think the other that I would really hope for, like some in-depth like writing, and we actually see a lot of it, is Garfield and Medium. I think Garfield and Medium will have, like, if they do interact, and they interact often, I think we'll have some of the most endearing dialogue, and I imagine some fun fights, but also some really funny fights. I think they would be a great combo.
That's a good point. Man, it's hard. I was thinking about this, and it might be kind of weird, but I was like, I'd kind of like it if Yorna meets Amelia and Priscilla, because it's like, come on, it's like she's the mom, right? And Amelia needs a mom, and I just think the two of them acting like they're quarreling in this chapter was really cute. It'd be funnier to see them kind of like have to acquiesce to a more like wiser matronly figure like Yorna is. I just think that'd be kind of cute if they have an interaction at all.
It'd be a really fun interaction too, I imagine, because Priscilla would be like very tsundere, right? Yorna is my feeling of how that would go. Yeah,
100%. I also think that another obvious one is Otto with Flop and Medium, because I think it's destined to happen. I think it's destined to happen because they're both merchants and they'd probably have a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. Man, you know what? That's actually a good point. It'd be funny if we learned something about the way that the dragon can work in this, if they're like not necessarily creatures. This would be kind of funny. Otto talks to the sky dragons that Madeline has, and like he's also able to talk to dragons as intimately as, say, Baleroy did or whatever, or Miles.
Oh, you actually just made me think of something. Is that why Tappei had to write a reason for Otto not to come with them in Arc 6?
I think you're right,
because he would just be able to ask Volcanica and get a clear understanding with him.
It wouldn't be his vocal words; it'd be his inner thoughts. Yeah,
I think that's another reason why he has such a great fate that like is unwritten in the books, is because he's able to speak to the world's true heart or whatever. Who knows?
Could very well be.
Tap into that more like nature side of the world, which I think is detached from Ode Lagana quite a bit, in my opinion. So a couple, now thinking on this, I'll say a couple more interactions I'd like to see on the idea of Medium, Otto, Flop. What if we get the third merchant of Anastasia in there? We cause some real capitalism chaos. Come on. I'm just saying that'd be really funny.
That'd be funny, yeah. I could also see, I mean, obviously Julius and Garfield. I think them interacting with any of the divine generals would be interesting, obviously. I think we're definitely going to see a moment where Julius is like trying to test the knightlyhood of, like the honor of a lot of the divine generals, and see that their way of thinking is completely different. Or maybe he already has some history because he, he fights against them because they're opposing the army. And as well as Garfield, I think he would have to learn something about the way of fighting from Volakia that he wasn't privy to,
My curiosity now is, right, as well, I feel like Julius is going to be a very different figure for Garfiel than Reinhardt is, whereas Reinhardt is like the apex and the person he holds like a lot of I have to beat. Julius may be like a more mentor kind of figure or someone that he looks up to. Because the thing is, right, I'm now thinking on the wider context of Julius has been forgotten by the world. If there's any time for him to make a name for himself while being Julie, in, unofficial politics way, but come on, we all know it's him way. I feel like it would be beating up a divine general.
I just thought of this. It's a great thought. Julius, the Spirit Knight versus Archaea, the Spirit Eater.
Oh, that would be a badass matchup. Holy shit.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Because the Volakia doesn't know anything about spirit art users. Like, even Madeline, I think Madeline had this misconception about them being the same thing, right?
It was Amelia. Madeline.
No,
Madeline was confused on if that's Amelia, what Archaea was. And then Amelia didn't know that the Spirit Eater existed.
Right. But yeah, it's interesting, like, the fact that they don't know anything about that also makes you wonder when Beatrice shows up, is ever going to be like, what are you? Yeah.
I think there is one last interaction I'll specifically talk about before we move on to actual in-depth stuff. And I think now thinking about this might be the one I'm most excited for. I think it's one that we all, in terms of speculation, would probably be most excited for. Ram and Al. Because Ram and Al are going to meet, right? Like, they have to at this point.
Yeah.
Well, possibly.
Unless Al tries to avoid her, that could be a thing. Rem and Ram too. Mm-hmm. Except Rem has been such a way.
Yeah, obviously. But Rem is kind of, I think almost for that exact reason, she has been kidnapped, so that when Rem comes, it's like, where? Like, oh, she's over there. That has to happen later.
It also gives us a person that we really care about in the capital to have eyes on the enemy side here.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you have two people that we would care about now.
Yeah, but Flop is in and out of consciousness at this point.
I mean, obviously right now he's being almost, seductively kept by Madeline at this point, being like, oh, weird pretty boy who has this attachment to my dead, the person I was betrothed to, but now he's here and has a connection to him, and now I have these weird feelings, that type of thing.
All right. So I think that probably leads us to a great first point to talk about here of being Madeline Earhart, our 9th Divine General, a dragon king that's commanding an army of flying dragons, and called out the name of something that brought down the real power down on top of them.
The Cloud Dragon, I believe.
Yes, Missoria.
That's very interesting for multiple reasons, and that's just from stuff that I know. And I'm going to say this vaguely, right? Because I don't know anything about Missoria at all, right? But I do know that it's the name of a city in Volakia. And that's interesting to me.
Oh.
Another thing is, I wonder if, this is just my speculation, is if the power is being called on from beyond the Great Waterfall and it's still like coming in. Like it'd be weird because like they're in these weird like, isolated, like situation. But unless like Messeria is like all the way up in the sky so far up that nobody can see, like past the clouds, past whatever.
Well, I was going to say, as a reminder for that point, there was a massive overcast during this entire fight.
Oh, that was
blocking out the sun. And after this beam comes down and attacks, then Priscilla's finally able to pull out the Yang sword. So something did part the clouds above them then.
Yeah.
Oh.
So maybe he did summon all these clouds to purposely quell the power of the sun.
And with the way it was written, I'm not sure how it is in the original Japanese. It very much came across as this is capital D dragon, like Volcanica dragon.
Yes, that is correct.
Like flying dragon, ground dragon, water dragon.
Which is very interesting, yeah.
That just adds like another layer, I think, onto this interesting element of Madeline herself, which is that she is the last dragonkin to her knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that may have... this is speculation on my part. I feel like there's going to be a deep attachment between her and this dragon, very much in the sense because Volcanica is not like in the public eye of Lagunica really anymore. It's interesting to me that this dragon is involved in this way, and maybe that has like a really important like symbolism and metaphor for Madeline's own story.
Yeah, so as we see with Madeline, she has these connections to the dragon, refers to herself as this dragon for her first person pronoun throughout all of it.
My pronoun is dragon, dragon, and dragon.
She is a lot of fun to read dialogue wise too. As an aside, like aside from her character, like reading her dialogue is really entertaining, and even in like, you know, it doesn't ruin the tone of serious moments because with the way Tappei writes the emotions and the supporting text around the dialogue, it fits really well. But her dialogue is just really entertaining. Like the way she speaks to other characters is just, it's like a fun combination of felt and melee almost to me.
Yeah, it's interesting because it also is one of those things where, like, I love how every character's dialogue is individualized. The closest I can think about it in relation to ReZero is Capella, where she's like, this lovely lady's, or like the way that she speaks every single time she talks, right?
Garfield uses a unique pronoun a lot of times as well.
Yeah.
Where Witch Gold translates it as my amazing self, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. You're 100% right.
Yes, you're right.
And I love when Priscilla first sees Madeline, she says, a dragonkin, where was such an antique unearthed? As if, like, because that's the way that she, like, to be honest, that kind of speaks a lot about how ancient or like rare this race is. Like, it's not even like a thing that you hear of. It's like, is this like from a storybook? Like, she was like, and that's actually interesting too, because that means that it's not like there was dragonkins, like, you know, a race ago. Like, there wasn't like a clan of dragonkin that was recently, you know, went extinct. It was like how old are dragonkin? Like, was Madeline like an egg or something? Like, that's the thing that I'm confused about. Is like, I wonder if Madeline was like sleeping somewhere and was recently awakened, or if she was like in stasis somehow, like magical stasis. Because it does.
Maybe they just don't age that much. Like Amelia is as an elf is going to live for a really long time, and the real elves are going to live even longer. So it's possible that a dragonkin might just have an exceptionally long lifespan, and she's just been out in the middle of nowhere until Abel/Vincent found her.
That's true. I mean, a thing that happens very often in the story, even in side story, is there's like races of people whom seem childish, right? But, you know, there's actually quite a theme that happens quite often in the story, in which somebody seems like a child that's actually like 400 years old, you know?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I wouldn't think that Madeline's that old, maybe, because she doesn't seem like she knows too much, or like she would have been making a name for herself maybe by now. Maybe she did in the past. But like, she wasn't Divine General beforehand. She had to wait for somebody to get killed.
Yeah, but it was someone that she knew personally as well. So she was at least involved with them before that replacement happened. I'm guessing that this was likely a discovery made by this Baleroy, this former 9th Divine General.
Yeah, I mean, he seemed like he was the flying. It said he was the flying dragon general beforehand, which means that he probably had a vested interest in learning about dragons, and maybe happened upon some sort of secret. And that was such a big secret, but perhaps that's why he got killed, because that secret was too big.
I mean, do you two believe Madeline's claim that Abel Vincent was the one that killed Baleroy here?
No, I don't. With how Abel is characterized in this story, like in the story so far, and I think the phase with this first half of the phase has confirmed it for me. I don't think Abel would do that.
Well, one thing that I do know is that just like Priscilla, right? There's like a sort of, you know, there's a kindness to the way that he sees the world, right? At the same point, he's also pragmatic about people who are, you know, aren't capable of fulfilling their use, or that feel like their use is fulfilled through some sort of sacrifice. I wouldn't be surprised if Baleroy appealed to, it wasn't like, oh, it's a misunderstanding maybe on Madeline's part, like that Baleroy sacrificed himself for some greater good, and then it seemed like Vincent killed, in quotes, Baleroy, but really Baleroy did it for some selfless reason, is my idea.
I see, the thing I'm thinking here, right, is I imagine there was a dichotomy between Abel and Baleroy, in where Baleroy maybe aligned more morally with what Abel was looking for, especially with how I've seen his character these past couple chapters, but maybe politically there was a drift of some sort, and that's where the rebellion came from. I do not think Abel was directly responsible for his death, or maybe not even indirectly. I have a feeling like some like political conniving went on there, whether that be with the Prime Minister Burets or Olbar or someone who's more interested in subterfuge in the Empire. I have a feeling that'd be a really good way to start the decline of Abel's rule if you wanted to overthrow him. Because
that was my suspicion, was that it was a fabrication that Burets had come up with in order to point Madeline at Abel here, at the version of Vincent that quote unquote killed Baleroy.
Yeah. I that is my suspicion. I just think it's out of character from what I know of Abel right now. Maybe that will change. Maybe he's like, oh, I'm working on myself for the mistakes I've made in the past or something. My thing is, at this current moment, I cannot see Abel being involved in that. So that's how I feel it probably went with how you just described, Connor, is what I'm feeling at the moment. That could change, because I have a feeling this is going to be a very relevant point for the next couple phases. I actually wanted to read a passage here about Dragonkin, if you guys would be all right with that, because there's some really interesting stuff here.
Right.
The innate physical abilities of a Dragonkin were incomparable to that of a frail human. Even a demi-human, who was relatively more robust compared to a normal human, was as good as a dried-up twig before a Dragonkin. The same was true even for the Oni race, which, abhorrent as it may seem, will be able to stand on the same ground beside the Dragon King. Dragonkin and the Oni were sometimes spoken of alongside each other as the strongest of races, but that was something outrageous. After all, the Oni were merely a race superior among demi-humans. Dragonkin were fundamentally different from them. Dragonkin were not demi-humans. They differed from those species related to the human race at a basic level. Dragonkin did not belong to mankind. That was a really interesting passage from some of these later chapters here, and it really makes me think. So it gives an in-character reason for why Madeline doesn't kill Rem when she takes her to the capital. She had
the in-character reason.
Well, she had the in-character reason, but she also has that added thing of, like, the kindred spirit of their races, in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Maybe. Did she really know that Rem was an Oni there?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she states that she's an Oni.
No, I think, well, that part, I know that they figure it out, right? Because Burets was like, hey, you're an Oni, maybe that's why I saved you. And she's like, is that really why you saved me? He's like, well, not the only reason.
Not really, no.
With him, sure. I didn't remember, or I might have just missed Madeline recognizing that. She only grabbed her because she was healing Claw.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But I mean, like, even after that fact, like, I think that may have influenced her a little bit in how that went. Even the main factor was Flop, obviously.
What's interesting about that is that I wonder if it's, it feels vaguely from the perspective of Madeline's thought process, right? Like the narrator was speaking from Madeline's perspective. Yeah,
she was in that scene. That's from her.
Yeah, I think so. Because one thing that I kind of noticed about that is like, well, sure, the Dragonkin are Dragonkin, right?
Yes.
Which means that they're probably humans ex-dragon, is my guess, right?
Well,
I think it's more like that they are dragons that happen to resemble the look of the humanoid races.
Yes, because with the way that's described, it's essentially saying, I am not human dragon. I am a dragon in the form of a human.
To be 100% fair, when I think about this, I always think of this as an overarching narrative in the story. For example, characters like Beatrice, who are completely spirit but look like humans completely, entirely act like humans, right? Like we saw in the Volume 1 with Zarestia, who is a entire spirit but takes on the form of humans, stuff like that. I think about it, I'm like, this is a theme because it's like, at what point does it matter, right? Because when somebody who is technically a dragon like Madeline is going to get married to a human, right? Have him as her mate, right? And speak as a human, look as a human, interact with humans on their basis. It's like a thing that I remember quoted. It's the fact that like these spirits, these like natural forms, are only observable and cared about humans if they can take the form of humans, right? So in that way, she's become human as a matter of to interact with humans, you know?
That's fair.
So like human in spirit almost, would you say? Not in like exactly, but it's like the human spirit is somewhat within.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if we learn more about Dragonkins and there's like a more naturalistic reason to them wanting to be with the humans, right? And that's a part of her history that she doesn't know, or perhaps part of history that was scorned in the past. For example, you know, the way that Volakia kills and extincts races because of their strength, right? If originally those dragons wanted to be closer with humans and then they killed all the dragons and sent them across the Great Waterfall, you know, that one attempt to make them like humans with Madelyn's race of the Dragonkin, she takes that as the greatest, you know, greatest disrespect, you know, the biggest betrayal. I wonder if that's not a part of her past, and that's the reason why she has such hatred, and she refers to herself only as a dragon because she hates humans because of what they do to one another or to her family, you know.
Well, she was beyond enraged that there was a human who was willing to fight for their own life against the flying dragons, like even a lesser form of dragon, like the big capital D ones.
Yeah.
In that you weren't just willing to lay down and die in the face of a superior being.
Oh my god.
Like, who gave you the right to that?
I just realized something crazy. Heinkohl is the ancestor of the person who slaughtered all of the dragons.
So
them meeting here is like fate, if you think about it like that.
Would this be a good intermission point to talk about some Heinkohl stuff? Because I actually really wanted to talk about this.
Yeah. I mean, there's not really too much else to go on Madeline. She's very strong. Her weapon's ridiculous.
Very angry.
We'll talk about her a little bit more towards the end and also towards their fight with Amelia and Priscilla.
So,
but yeah, Heinkohl, fucking badass here.
Heinkohl is awesome. He also has an Astrea heirloom as his sword, and it's literally called the Sword Astrea. Which is just fucking funny to me. But the main thing I want to get across to the audience here is whilst everyone else is playing Dark Souls, Heinkohl here is playing a early God of War game, because oh my god, he is just like decapitating and slitting the throats of flying dragons with a sword, jumping around like a superhero, and he's bathing in their blood. And as Gold mentioned here earlier, this is a really cool nod, and I feel like there's going to be some symmetry here in terms of like where his direction will go with his ancestor Reed, because Reed was a famous dragon slayer, right? So,
well, the Astrea's sword isn't it called the Dragon Slayer, or is it called the Dragon Sword?
The Dragon Sword.
Never mind then.
Yeah,
because it's blessed by Volcanica and has the scabbard, the talent.
Right.
Because I think the Volcanica thing is more of like an exception, right? Than it being.
Now that I think about it, I wonder if dragons like Madeline think of Volcanica as a betrayer.
Probably, I imagine, because he's one of the last of his race too, right?
Yeah.
So
he helped the swordsman to see. Yeah, it's interesting.
So for anyone that doesn't know Dark Souls, again, this will be a mute reference, but I feel like this is almost like a Seath the Scaleless from Dark Souls 1 kind of vibe for me with Volcanica. But I feel like Volcanica is very detached from other dragons. And that is why he may have worked with Reed. But Reed was a known dragon slayer. He killed a lot of them. And like by a lot, I mean a lot. And it's really interesting to see one of his descendants, Heinkohl here, carry on that legacy, which he probably does know from the Astrea library, I imagine. Actually, now I think about it. There's probably not an unknown connection to Heinkohl here. But Heinkohl's got some really interesting characterization in this part of the phase that I'd like to talk about. So we learn that Heinkohl is very slowly starting to take things a bit more seriously in pursuit of whatever goal he has that he wants to obtain from Priscilla here, right? Where we see a moment earlier in this half of the phase where Priscilla has got all of the members of her makeshift camp here in her new mansion in the Fortress City, and she's like, okay, guys, we got to be ready. Something is going to happen soon, right? Because we're in a story, you know? But Heinkohl made a comment previously of, man, this is too boring for me. I'm going to go to the tavern and drink. But he doesn't, especially after Priscilla mentions it, and he actually goes to discuss things with Zakir at the City Hall, which is really interesting. And we learn, because we actually see a couple points from Heinkohl's perspective in these chapters, that he gave up long ago on training military strategy, on being playing the role of deputy commander how he's supposed to in the Guernica. What he never gave up was training with that sword every day. And we get a really cool line of dialogue from him at one point where he says, it's either I'm not a sword or no one can be a sword. I'm not too sure which is which.
Yeah, no one can be a sword, he said.
Heinkel is simultaneously embracing the heritage of Wilhelm and Theresia and rejecting it at the same time.
Yeah, because that's very true. I think what he was saying there is that his family's line has always been, you are a sword. He saw it with his son, and he felt like he lost his son there. He saw that with his parents, right? And he was like, I can't be like them. I won't be like them. And Schultz even says something that I think kind of portrays this very well. And it portrays this and also shows that he follows the same path. He works just as hard as his family does. And we see him later on. We'll talk about this later, about the way that his attitude manifests. But, Schultz says, Heinkel Sama's way of swinging the sword every day was better for me than Al Sama's way of taking 10 days off after 1 day of swinging. I can't tell Al Sama this because I don't want him to disappoint. I don't want to disappoint him. It's very funny, but it also shows the difference between the way and attitudes of these two people, which is that Heinkel's actually very dependable, as long as you don't consider his attitude as being a good judgment of his actual character.
Yes.
Because his, self-admonishing attitude is actually, you would think that the way that he sees himself or the way that he second-guesses himself means that he's actually weak, but that's not it at all. He trains as hard as everyone else. He cares as much as everyone else, but he just can't show it or manifest it.
He wasn't lucky enough to be given the divine protection of the Sword Saint, despite him putting in the work and effort for it.
It's almost like we're seeing one of Theresia's brothers be an older man, like get to live past his like late 20s, early 30s, and actually have the full potential of the sword without being the Sword Saint, if that makes sense. That he's reached his height with the sword, and the reason he trains every day is to maintain it, not to better himself. Like, he's already at that level, is the kind of vibe I'm getting.
Heinkel would have also grown up having seen the Sword Saint power as a burden, something given to you, not out of any effort or hard work or even desire. It was on his mom and she never wanted to use it. And she was cursed with an even more horrific divine protection as well. And that he would have been learning how to fight from Wilhelm, who is entirely self-made.
Yeah. And it adds this interesting dichotomy, I think, for Heinkel, where he had that weight of expectation of knowing that he thought he was going to be the Sword Saint, right? Instead of Reinhardt, I feel.
Well, there's that. And he also would have been a point of, I've been training just like my father has been.
Yes.
Like, doing everything I can, doing everything the way that my father does, who was able to surpass the Sword Saint. And then when we get to Heinkel against Reinhardt, who the moment Reinhardt gets the Sword Saint powers, he's able to overcome and defeat Heinkel in their first bout at like 8 years old or whatever.
Yeah, and it's of a level where it's not something you can overcome, like with Theresia, because Reinhardt, I think some people kind of forget this sometimes. Reinhardt is not a typical Sword Saint. He is atypical in every sense of the word, like the most powerful Sword Saint there has ever been.
Mm-hmm. It's enough to stop war against Volakia.
Yeah, literally nuclear deterrence, right? Reinhardt deterrence. It's a thing. It's so interesting to me that we get this characterization with Heinkel where he's simultaneously embracing parts of his heritage and rejecting it at the same time. But it's really complicated in a way that feels very grounded and human. And it makes me feel a lot of empathy for him, even if I dislike a lot of the things he's done to other characters in the series, right?
Well, I think this chapter also shows a lot of his humanity, just the way she speaks about his relationship with Heinkel. That he feels comfortable around him, that he feels safe, and that Heinkel cares about him more than anybody.
It's not even just of the level of Heinkel is this for Schultz. He is the only person for Schultz that he can feel fully comfortable with, not feel like he's not being expected of enough or has too much expectations on him. Heinkel actually treats him with respect in a way that no one else does in his life, where Priscilla and Al tell him constantly, you just wait, you'll be able to get it one day, where Heinkel's like, no, that's not good enough, you need to start working for it now. And so they start training in swordsmanship together.
Heinkel is also someone that is supposed to be a dad, and get to train like this next generation,
Yes.
like Wilhelm would have done for him, and had that taken from him.
Yeah.
Like Reinhardt gets to start out better than Heinkel. What could he ever give to his son? What could he teach him, help him with, teach him? Or I said that twice. Encourage him to do. It's nothing. He's literally crossed over and made pointless. And Schultz can probably fulfill some of that for him.
And simultaneously, right, whilst it's also a thing, I think, for we've discussed this about Reinhardt before, how he can never have his own interests because he's always going to have the divine protection to be good at something. And it also extends to past swordsmanship, right? Like, that's an important thing for the Astrea family. But Heinkel doesn't even have anything he can teach his son, which is a really important part of the dynamic of parenthood, especially fatherhood, I think, to father to son, right? Where it's, I can give something to him. I can give him a skill or an interest or talent. And so he always carries something from me that makes him my son. And I think in a lot of ways, Heinkel doesn't see Reinhardt as his son because he wasn't able to have that experience with him.
I'm certain that that's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
And another reason of that is that if Reinhardt is just a sword, then he can't even teach him about things that aren't about the sword.
Yeah.
So the fact that he can't even do that means that there's no hope at all. He can't teach. I mean, he can if he, thought of him another way.
Yes.
But like the idea that he sees, and Reinhardt sees himself as a sword, means that, Heinkel doesn't want to impose and try to teach him about, how to find a wife, or how to, be happy, or to not to be as hard on yourself as you should be, and that type of thing.
I think the ultimate thing to take away from Heikel's characterization here is that whilst trying to not be the father Wilhelm was to him, because Heinkel, it's not expressed explicitly, right? But the implicit implication is Heinkel, respected Wilhelm's strength and what he taught him in terms of martial ability, but in terms of the emotional ability as a father, he was not truly there for him, like Teresia was for him. And it feels like in my mind, if I was like empathizing as I'm Heinkel Astrea, right? My son, I want to be the better father than my father was to me. I want to be able to teach him these things, but also teach him how to be a better man, like teach him emotions and to be open and be better in communication. And Heinkel is committing the same sins his father did with his own fatherhood. And it adds a really cool, cyclical nature to the generational trauma of the Astrea family, right?
Right. There was a thought I had when rereading in preparation for tonight, where it was earlier on in this part of the phase, where from Heinkel's view, where he's going after Priscilla because if she's gone, then there's no way for him to get what he's getting out of their arrangement, right?
Yeah.
Which makes me think to Roswal and how he's with Amelia because he wants to use the dragon for something.
Right.
What would Heinkel want to use the quote unquote dragon? Obviously it's not the dragon actually, but what would his
the dragon blood, for example, the same thing they want to use for all of Amelia's people, or to help with the kidnap. What is Heinkel thinking of doing it? And I'm wondering, is it's either his wife and getting her out of the situation he's in, or do you think he might try to use it to purge his family of the Sword Saint divine protection?
I think it's both. I think it's actually both. I don't think either cannot be true together, right? I think specifically with how he thinks about it from his point of view stuff in these chapters, it's very much a feeling of he needs this so desperately, right? He doesn't care about the city. He doesn't care about the inhabitants. He cares about Schultz because he's built a father-son type relationship with him.
And because Schultz is important to Priscilla.
Priscilla, exactly. And that adds another connection. And Schultz is the one that basically ensures Heinkel kind of gets kept around in the Priscilla camp in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, I can't remember if it was him or Flop that carries him out of the battlefield when Priscilla shows up.
But
Flop,
Schultz, by proxy defending Heinkel, it enables that, right?
Yeah, I mean, he literally jumped in front of the blast in front of the hit for him.
The hit for him. And it adds a thing, right, where Heinkel is so desperately wanting this thing that he's wanting that it can only logically be for me his wife Luana. Because I think that's where he thinks it went wrong, right? That's where he thinks that it all went wrong. That if he just has Luana back, he can have his family back in a lot of ways. But then he's like, wait, but what is the thing that plagues this family aside from the loss of my wife?
That was my thought to it, is that we know that he has this anguish and angst against the Sword Saint, and it looks at first like it would because it passed him over and he didn't get it. But he saw Wilhelm not need it.
Yes.
So it can't just be that him not having that Sword Saint power is why he's so bitter about it, because it didn't matter that to his mom that she had it. But it caused problems for Wilhelm himself. It caused problems for his relationship with Reinhardt. And the way that it worked is what got his mom killed.
So, as an evolution to our previous theories, maybe it's not that Heinkel will become the Sword Saint. Maybe he will break the Sword Saint lineage and he'll be the one that takes the protection away from Reinhardt and destroys it.
That's what I'm thinking. He wants the dragon blood of winning the royal selection for.
So Dragon Blood could do that, right?
Possibly.
I have a further extrapolation on this. Here's my theory. It's going a bit further on that. I think at one point, because we know the observers are capable of controlling the way divine protections work, I think at one point in the story, we're going to want to, try to attack the world, for a want of a better term. And there's going to be a moment wherein the main character, Subaru, even tries to fight against the observer's will. But Reinhardt, through the divine protection of the Sword Saint, is acting under the observer's influence, and that is why he's a hero, and hero is all he could ever be in such a. He
has to save the world, in quotes.
Yeah. Yes, he has to save the world, right? And I think in that case, Heinkel will team up with the Amelia camp at some point and try to, get rid of that divine protection.
I just had a thought as an even further extension to that in terms of like symbolism and themes of the story, right? Where the main problem with Lagunica is its stagnancy and its reliance on Reinhardt. The main issue there is that Reinhardt didn't choose to be a hero. He's not a hero of his own will. The people that are like true, like, heroes in a positive sense in a lot of the story are people like Wilhelm, right? Who Subaru looks up to the most out of any male figure in the story, at least from what I understand. And he that is a posit of, because Wilhelm chose to be a hero. Wilhelm worked to be a hero. Wilhelm bled to be a hero. Reinhardt never wanted to be a hero. Teresia never wanted to be a hero. I don't necessarily think Heinkel wants to be a hero either. And I think
he wanted to at one point.
That's the best way to put it. But he no longer wishes to, right? And I think that adds the element of, we can even talk on an extension of what Al wants for Subaru in being a hero, right? And like how it always in this story goes wrong when someone is forced to become a hero, whether that's by the wills of fate or destiny or Ode Lagana or whatever that be. But if someone makes themselves that hero, that's where you get a lot of the positive change and a lot of the positive emotions and themes around heroism in the story.
I'd even go ahead and say that by the way the story is going, I think the definition of striving to be a hero is misguided, because in your heroism, declaring yourself just a hero, right? Just being just in your heroism is only going to be benefiting a certain amount of people, right?
Yeah.
By Reinhardt's title being self-imposed on him through the world, what says the world, their influence, the world's desires, is greater than the desire of the world's inhabitants.
Yes.
That's going to be that sounds like a grand cosmic theme, but when you really think about it, that's true, right? The only reason why, as humans, we decide and dictate value on the world is because we all inhabit it and live in it. And sure, there's a lot of great things about the world, but there's also a lot of horror in the natural way in which it kind of, fights against humanity in a certain way. I think that's part of it too. We're going to be seeing a moment in which, for example, Reinhardt has to protect the natural essence of the world, or maybe of fate. But in doing so, it makes a worse outcome for everybody living there.
Yeah. on that note, and this is going like even further into some subtext and like themes and stuff. Now, this is just an assumption. I can't state Tappei's feelings on culture and society, but I find it very interesting that this is coming from a Japanese author in which Japanese society is very communal, right? And very much not focused on individualism and the wants and needs of the individual. It's about the betterment of society as a whole. And Reinhardt is I feel, a very good statement on that sort of idea, right?
That's true. Yeah. And to an extent, Heinkel being this disgruntled older man that's indulging in drink and got very highly trained at what his skill is, but isn't as good as a lot of other people, could also be kind of a fantasized version of like the salary man.
Yes, exactly.
Where he's unhappy. He doesn't get to be around his wife. He doesn't really know his kids and didn't get to raise them because he had his own jobs and responsibility. But oh, my dad had it harder.
Yeah.
It sounds like the idea of a Japanese businessman,
and
just done as a fantasy version.
And now my child is going off, and technology makes things easier for them, but I can't. The world is different than it was when I was a kid.
Yeah, there were heroes. There were heroes back then. It's very much like a Song of Ice and Fire thing. Like Jamie Lannister, the real heroes were back in my time when I was young.
Yeah.
Like one last thing I wanted to mention for Heinkel here in relation to his possible goal. This is more of a theory craft. But one of the scenes that we get from Amelia's view of the future is Wilhelm shouting out, "You can't even wield the sword without it, can you?" And we've assumed that that's probably directed at Reinhardt about the Sword Saint. So it makes me wonder if we have a dragonkin here now that Heinkel has already fought against once, and it's seeming like there's a capital D dragon in this as well. Is it possible he may be able to get a hold of that sooner than later,
by getting
even without Priscilla winning the camp and managing to get the divine protection off of Reinhardt?
That whilst he can't be the black-haired traveler, that would cause almost a catastrophe in itself, right? For Lagunica, that would be the final barrier to prevent other nations from invading Lagunica right now, right?
I'm going to say something very far-fetched too, which is, a new dragon showing up would definitely even the odds there. I'm wondering now if there might be some sort of theme in which the bloodline of the Astrea family and that of the dragons have to repair or renew a bond in some way. And that I wouldn't be surprised if Madeline and Heinkel will have to come to some sort of agreement. And it's already kind of set up here, right? Because they have this interaction. Madeline has this very clear image of somebody who disrespected and killed the dragon, somebody too pathetic because Heinkel's so pathetic. He's not an actual, warrior. He's not an actual human. He's not worthy enough to do whatever. By showing that he's worthy to Madeline once again in the future, I wonder if they'll come to an understanding, and that might forge a new pact or a new bond between the races or the Astrea family and a dragon,
And this is there are going to be two more major things I want to talk about Heinkel. They won't be very long, but I just thought they'd be interesting points to talk about because they're points we've missed here. But on an extension to your point there, I'm now thinking of the Dragon Sword Reed, right? And how that is detached from the Sword Saint divine protection. Because it's not in that sense of, this is for the Astrea family, gifted to them by Volcanica. But what is its purpose? We only ever seen it drawn when something goes against nature in the story, or is going to threaten the existence of the world itself, where we see it in the trial with Puck and Reinhardt. And we see it with Reinhardt and Teresia, where Teresia, in her state there, is a genuine threat to the order of the world, right?
Did he not pull it out against Regulus? I don't remember.
He did not.
He does. Doesn't he? Oh no, he pulls it against.
He smacks him with it in the scabbard. He doesn't.
He pulls it against his mom, his grandmother.
So it adds this element to me of that connection with the Astrea family to Volcanica. Maybe that's the real thing that should have been pursued, and not this protection from Old Laguna. Right? That's at least an idea to play around. Because the thing is that, Reinhardt... This is also a statement on isekai, if you think about it, in the sense of, all of these heroes in a lot of these isekai stories that are destined to be these heroes, like, is that necessarily truly deep down what a lot of like the average person would want? Because I know in a lot of the stories it is, but that's another commentary you could say on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But my thing here is, what if that is like the Astreas have lost touch with what made them what they are because of the Sword Saint?
I think that's partially right. Yeah, I think there's something interesting that I noticed, which is a parallel, and I might be cooking too hard, but here's two layers of it. The first layer is not too hard of a cook. The second layer might be too hard of a cook. The first layer is pretty easy, right? Which is the fact that Heinkel is sort of loosely going to mirror the ambition that he thought had left him, the ambition that his father Wilhelm had, which is to overcome the Sword Saint, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's going to happen in this arc even, or maybe not this arc, but maybe the next, right? In which I think Heinkel will come face to face with Ceaseless Segment, and because he even mentioned this chapter, that like there's a divine general who is on the level of Reinhardt, that can't be possible, that type of thing. If he managed to best Ceaseless Segment in a sword fight, it will, that'll be crazy, right? But it also will come up with that theme, right? This theme that like, he like his father has to overcome somebody of that strength through skill alone, not through
It's not just that he's living up to his father's legacy, he's living up to the first Sword Saint's legacy, Reed didn't have the divine protection. Reed was completely self-made.
That's true.
In a sense, maybe it's not destroying the Sword Saint, it's remaking the idea of what makes the Sword Saint, right?
Right, I think that's why he wants to take the divine protection away, get rid of it.
But make it just a title that you earn. Kind of similar to like the Sword of the Morning.
They have that already with the title of Van Astrea.
Van Astrea, yeah. But that's the thing. Maybe that's the thing that's focused on. You earn the title of Van Astrea, right? Like, and the Dragon Sword Reed could help the title holder of the Sword Saint. That could be their holy sword.
That's probably why his sword is Astrea and not Reed.
Exactly. And my curiosity here is, I'm going to read just a small line of text from Heinkel's perspective here, because I think it perfectly sums up the characterization. Even if he did, his title as Deputy Commander of the Royal Guard was merely decorative. He had stopped studying the basics of military strategy a long time ago, and more importantly, no one would listen to his instructions. So, from the beginning, there was only one thing that Heinkel could do. And that, I think, is getting to the point of the only thing Heinkel could do is use his sword to overcome his obstacles, right? Like, he made it there, and he has to overcome these things himself. He can't, like, he isn't aided by fate. Because let's be honest, fate doesn't smile on Heinkel at all, does it? The world does not love Heinkel.
Yeah, he's very unlikely, and that's why
the world chose his son, not him.
That's why it's actually very interesting if he does manage to do all these crazy, because it is almost, in a way, the observers, let's just say, right, see him unfavorably, is just my opinion, right? They see him as a bit part to play in the world. I don't think that they consider him, right? Because obviously they consider his mother, his son, they look over him. So if he managed to do all these crazy, amazing things, then his story in this is forging his own fate in his own path.
Exactly. And that gets even deeper to the main themes of the story themselves. Because we'll probably talk about Priscilla a little bit here in a sec. But Priscilla mentioned something earlier where she straight up just says, while talking to everyone that she's gathered, or I think it's just specifically Rem, where she mentions that, life would have no meaning if everything was written down in a story, and that all-powerful observers are like wrong. She straight up says observers there, doesn't she?
Yeah, she does.
She does. She says, "Do you guard me as this world's observer, manipulate every event?"
You cut out there a bit.
You cut out there, but...
Oh, sorry. I said, your skepticism is also a sign of your preconceived notions. Do you regard me as this world's observers who can manipulate every event at will?
I think that's just Priscilla literally telling you the themes of the story right then and there. The one last thing I'd like to read out from Heinkel is just a really cool prose thing of... We actually, this is, I think, maybe the first time we get a proper, physical explanation of the flow technique. A boiling, throbbing black heat poured out of his chest and into his entire body. Heinkel gritted his teeth to the point of creaking as he savoured the dark heat that began in his heart, travelled through his internal organs and lower abdomen, then onward to the tips of his limbs and fingers. Such a cool, I
think that's just an adrenaline rush from him deciding to do it. The flow technique explanation feels more scientific later when we get it.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yes. This is him getting up through sheer determination. It's that fire within him he's pushing it through everything. Yes. It's just him being the man that's getting up to do it. Nothing to do with bloodline or magic or even mana or strength or stamina. He's just willing himself to get back up.
I think what we'll wrap up and say with Heinkel here is that he's made by his father and his mother and his family, his son and his ancestor Reed, and there's a lot of symmetry and symbolism with him simultaneously accepting parts of his heritage and rejecting it. And it's a really cool characterization that I'm really excited to see more of, and I think it really fits well with the themes of particularly the story going against fate, not being loved by the world, and also a very good symmetry to Subaru, just like how young Wilhelm is a good symmetry to Subaru in a lot of ways.
Right. One final thing I wanted to mention then that you kind of brought up here before of him being sort of a bit player in the story is that, sure, that's maybe how he sees it and even possibly how Priscilla sees it. But when you have someone like Flop and Schultz who look at Heinkel like this, they think, well, this is someone cut above us. This is one whose existence here is going to change the outcome of the battle in one way or another. He has an important part to play here.
Yeah.
Like, Flop sees him as this game-changing factor.
Yes. I mean, just from the very small amount of time he sees his swordsmanship in action, that's what he thinks, right?
Because that is the truth, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, because that is the ultimate truth. Heinkel is important. Heinkel, regardless of what fate and the world tells Heinkel can be important. Heinkel can change things. Heinkel can change fate. He can mend the wounds of his family. He just has to work towards it, right?
Right.
Yeah, and as we see in this chapter, the limitations that he has are only on himself. I think one thing that were kind of made clear in the narration, but also in his thoughts, right, his perspective, is that there are people in the kingdom of Lagunica who are on par with the divine generals. He does not put himself on that level, because he sees somebody like Cecilius, who's on the level of Reinhardt. He cannot possibly be on the level of Reinhardt. He thinks that is existence so far beyond the pale of a measly human like himself, that when he comes face to face with somebody who is divine general, he doesn't even try, even though it might be a fight that he can win, or a fight that he might be able to stall out enough that some people can help him. But he doesn't even bother, even though we saw him be more than capable in the eyes of even Flop or Schultz. They see that and they think, oh, we're safe. As long as Heinkel's with us, then we're definitely fine, right? But
now, in his defense here, considering what we see Madeline pull off in her fight against Amelia and Priscilla, I don't think Heinkel stood a chance, and he would have been defeated handedly.
That's why he was scared and fell to his knees. That's because he knew he wouldn't. Because Heinkel has good battle instincts. He knew he was going to die in that instant.
I honestly think it's a bit more than that, right? Which is in that. There's something very funny. This is going to be a reference to another anime, right? In Hunter x Hunter, there's a character who says, you were defeated the moment that you got overwhelmed by somebody's power and immediately assumed that you would lose, because battle is not all about brute strength. It's about cunning. It's about guile. It's about everything, right? It's about experience. Mm-hmm. I think to assume that somebody who is a tier above you is at 100% of their power at all times, and you aren't going to be able to beat them because of that. Sometimes somebody's having an off day. Somebody is, whatever. By Heinkel not even bothering to try, he was defeated from the get-go.
Oh, that's an interesting point, actually, yeah.
That is fair. And honestly, we get earlier in this Phase B from Rem's perspective that when she's sizing them all up, she thinks Heinkel is almost at the same level that Priscilla's at.
Yeah, and I think that's why I think he has a lot to go for. It's not just because, sure, there's a pragmatism, right? Maybe she is stronger than him, but he doesn't realize the fact that as a more experienced fighter or somebody who is more vicious or more cunning, who is less primal and instinctual, like Madeline probably is, that he'd be able to win somehow. There's always opportunity, but he gave up already, and he didn't even allow himself the opportunity to see if that's possible.
What? I know we keep on extending this, but there's now, building on top of everything we've already said, there's two more things I want to say again. I want to see Heinkel interact with Rowan.
You're not supposed to know about that yet, so we'll leave it at that.
Oh, am I not?
No, that has not been revealed in the story yet.
Oh, I am so sorry. What time is this in the recording? I'll make sure this is cut out.
No, it's fine. I'm sure anyone reading this knows that, or watching this knows that, but you, Wolf, should not know that yet. That was an accidental spoiler.
Yeah, that was the one thing I did get less spoiled on. What was I going to say? Oh, yes. My other thing was here. There's an interesting symmetry with some of Flop's story of how Flop feels about adults, and how one character in his backstory talks about how the people that hit children were children that were hit in their own abusive situation, right? In a way, it's really interesting that Flop sees this potential in Heinkel as someone that maybe hasn't hurt Reinhardt physically, because he never could, but mentally has, right? And
possibly
that's an interesting symmetry there. And also, oh my god, it's slipping my brain. Also, I think about it, especially from what we see of how he interacts with Reinhardt in Arc 5, Heinkel has not talked to Reinhardt as Reinhardt, and only as the Sword Saint, since he beat him in that duel at Age 8. He has never talked to Reinhardt as his son, only ever as the Sword Saint.
I don't think he sees his son there, because it's taken over.
It's not his son Reinhardt, it's the Sword Saint. There is no Reinhardt, right?
I would agree with him. I don't think there is a Reinhardt. I don't think he has a character. That's kind of his problem, is that he doesn't have a character beyond being the Sword Saint. That's literally the Greek tragedy of the Astrea family at this point, eh? All right, so we have harped on about this old drunk for more than long enough. Let's talk on Priscilla for a bit here. So we get to really see her in action in this part of the phase, just going all out to fight and protect this city. We get to see her interactions with the different members of her camp, and learn that she shares a rather unique ability with another character in the first half of this phase. Yeah! Some crazy reveals on that end, right? Of she can use soul marriage technique, like Yona? And Schultz uses it? What the hell?
Yeah, I guess this is one of those things where I wonder, one of those Fox people. That's what Madeline said.
Yeah, well, she asks if you're related to that Fox person. Yeah. Or Fox woman, or whatever she says. It's like about I am the original. Everything else that is copying me or whatever.
Yeah, she does. An interesting thing about this chapter is that Priscilla's using these weird half English, half Japanese terms in a lot of she's mispronouncing Japanese words.
Well,
is that right?
It's English. It's English in the text. So what's likely happened is Al has said English terms and Priscilla has started using them herself.
Okay, that makes sense. Yes.
Similar to how Beatrice has begun using a couple of them after spending so long with Subaru. Similar thing with Priscilla here. I think the version that we're reading, just made that flip so that you would know when they're speaking in English. Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay, got it. That makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting, but yeah, she's the original.
Anything else is a poor imitation.
Everything else is that's just the type of thing that she says, but we know that there's somebody older technique, so that seems unlikely, right?
My curiosity is, right, it feels right to me that Priscilla is her daughter. This is my speculation, right? Because even though she doesn't have the Fox features that Yona had, she doesn't have the demi-human features. From a symbolism perspective, and from what Yona has told us, it makes sense. She was in love with the previous emperor. Priscilla is a child of the previous emperor, obviously, and that technique would be a thing that would connect them, and it would explain Yona's desire to be a mother to the children around her if she lost her own child. Or maybe she wasn't actually there for her child, and then when she lost her, she regretted it, kind of thing. It may have changed her perspective on life.
Abel would have known that, though? Or that they would have brought that up when they were going to Chaos Flame and Priscilla was present at those conversations?
Well, this is the thing. There's unknown factors in that. I don't know, if if that was even public knowledge. Because the thing is, right, the way it worked is a lot of them were like official consorts to the Emperor, right? At least from my understanding. But he could have just also done stuff around, because as we see in this in the previous phase, Vincent declares Subaru as his illegitimate child. Maybe Priscilla could be an illegitimate child. I don't know. That's, again, these are all speculations. Like, if more information could change this, but I just feel like at least they are definitely related in some way. Not like in a bloodline sense, but it just even just connected in some way. But I feel like it would be really interesting if she was her daughter.
All I can say to that is Priscilla's family situation is discussed in this arc, and thus I am unable to truly comment on that.
Okay, but we will learn about it.
Yes, and I'm pretty sure Gold has had that spoiled on him already, on her family situation.
Yeah.
Okay, so no more discussion about that then.
Unfortunately. It's an interesting theory, though, because although for the aspect of Priscilla's soul marriage being the original, when we get from Yorna's narration around her, they mention that other users of this technique wouldn't be limited either. It's just that her version is so much stronger because her soul is so much stronger.
Yeah, it's like it's more to do with the root of the power of her soul, right?
And you know what's interesting? That shows Priscilla's power as well, because she has a vast soul too. I wonder how long she's had this power manifest, and if she's only learning how to use it recently, or if it could get to if she truly sees this world as her entire, belongings, and everything works for
everything works out in her favor.
In her favor, exactly.
Then what is the limit of Priscilla's soul marriage? If she thinks so broadly about the world, could she at one point, see the world as her possession?
Because to her possessions are her love, right? Like Fiona.
Yeah.
But interestingly, now I don't know how much it applies to any other members of her clan, but we only see it specifically with Schultz, and I feel like thematically it wouldn't make much sense for Owl to have it.
And her dress as a point.
And her dress, yeah. So what if I could take this in two directions. Either she does have a huge breadth of soul and she's just not choosing to have a lot of people involved in her soul marriage technique because it's new to her, or this is the other possibility. What if she
that's what's being said is irrelevant to the size of your soul, is how many people that you can love. Because that's limitless. Yorna was exceptional because it said that her soul was 1,000 times stronger,
which
made everybody else that she was extending that to so much more powerful.
Yeah, but the other thing I was going to mention here is it proves her value of Schultz in particular, specifically, and how everyone in the Priscilla camp loves Schultz universally. There's not one person that dislikes him, right? And
nope.
And it makes me feel like, especially with some of the discussions we see with Flop and Utataka, and how Utataka wants to train him and how Heinkel's training him, I feel like Schultz is going to become one badass boy. He's what, 13?
Yeah.
I think he's 11.
11.
Something like that. But I wonder if there's like another 5-year time skip, if something like that might bear out,
He's gonna, or even because of the way that the story, like in terms of time, might go, we may see him like be a grown guy in Lagunica by the end of near the end of the story, and he comes in and plays an important role, becomes like, look, Garth Yell, this great hero he's probably going to become, and Schultz like kind of is building on that almost and becoming his own great hero. That's I'm just throwing stuff out there, but I think that's a really fun idea.
Look, just throwing this out as potential. Petra Schultz ship after a 5-year time skip.
Oh my god, that would be so cute. That's
a good point. Or yeah, I mean, I could see that blossoming together if, there's something very funny about this, and we can get into this, but it's just the way in which both Amelia and Priscilla see their situations differently, right? Mm-hmm. In which, Amelia doesn't care about necessarily defeating, Priscilla, even if it would be benefiting her. She's just like, well, no, why would I let you die? There's no point in that, right? That'd be mean, So and Priscilla's like, you're just a half devil. We're supposed to be, at war with each other,
Yeah. And
at that point, it's like, I wonder if there might be like a moment in which, obviously they all need to work together at some point for the betterment of the world, if a disaster is about to strike or whatever. But like, we've seen the alliance between them and Krush. I wonder if there might be an alliance with them and Priscilla. Priscilla's camp, I should say.
It would make sense for at least to have that while they're here.
Yeah, like a temporary, like, we need to sort the situation out, especially if there's a coming catastrophe.
Disaster. Great disaster.
Disaster, yes. I said it and then was like, okay, no, that's wrong. I see, one thing here, I really enjoyed the interactions between Amelia and Priscilla in these chapters, and it really came with, like, sibling vibes, right? Of, like, how they bicker. Because Priscilla clearly, even though she says essentially very hurtful and horrible things to Amelia, she says it in the way Priscilla says things, of, like, how she calls Al and Subaru jesters or clowns, right? Like,
Fair.
I think they are, here's my big statement. I think they are, as far as the selection goes, the two characters most poised to be, I should say, polar opposites narratively, functionally, in a sense that, in a sense that I think that if one starts to get out of the story, or one starts to, come or go, or like we move on Priscilla's camp. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
You're good.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'm back. Where was I at? Oh yeah, that is the point at which I think if one of the two of them, were to go, I feel like the stakes of the selection will become much less, because it's just how starkly they contrast each other, to the point in which I just feel like, like one is fire, one is ice, like their personalities are totally flipped on one another, like almost completely. Their camps almost loosely mirror one another in a sense.
Yes.
It feels like they're like perfectly constructed. Like, I should say, Priscilla's perfectly constructed to be Amelia's rival.
One of the things that I was wondering if this part of the story was going to be setting up was, we clearly see that there is a good, healthy friendship between Rem and Priscilla, that Rem cares about her very quickly.
Yeah.
Even with the, 2 days that they've spent with each other at this point. Eventually, we can assume that Rem is going to get brought back into the Amelia camp and be expected to serve as the maid for Roswell and for Amelia. Of how much she's going to be comparing Amelia to Priscilla there.
Yes.
Like, you're not the one in charge here. Not everyone is here because they're devoted to you. They're devoted to your cause. Like, you aren't going around and ensuring everyone is at their best and is their best. Like, what are you offering to the royal selection?
Oh, so in a way, right, if in the opposite way how old Rem used to be the one that would, like, push Subaru forward, she's also going to be challenging Amelia. Like, being the one that challenges her. And that's why the polygamy theory makes even more sense.
Sure.
Because,
whatever gets you there.
It's good for Amelia, right? Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, that interaction got cut off again.
Yeah.
Because she's kidnapped at the end of
God
this phase.
damn it, to pay. Ram, Amelia, I want to see them talk to Rem. Let people talk to Rem. Please.
No, we have to delay that emotional catharsis as far. We have to kick it farther along
down the road. Yeah.
Yeah. Because when it happens, here's my theory about it, just because I think Tepei's a jerk. I think they're going to reunite, but there's going to be a sadness still.
Yeah.
Like, something else bad is going to happen.
This is, like, completely aside from this. Is there a possibility that Rem doesn't end up in the Amelia camp and she ends up in the Priscilla camp, even if she retains her memories?
There was a lot of discussion around that in these chapter releases.
Because that is a totally valid thing. I could see that happening. Like, I wouldn't say it's like a definite, but I could see it going either way at this current point.
The only reason I never believed that would be the case was because of how much Al hates Rem for whatever fucking reason.
But that could be resolved by the end of these two arcs.
I don't think anything with the word resolution exists in Al's storyline anytime soon.
That's fair.
His entire ability is to make sure that things get dragged on
and go his way.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no compromise.
You have to bury your feelings deep down. The truth behind your emotions will never. He'll just keep dodging death. Death is the metaphor for him confronting his feelings.
He died 1,000 times trying to convince Priscilla to make a different decision.
Yeah.
True.
And he literally did that it was almost like a whim, right? It's like, let's see if I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
and
So-
that is deeply disturbing.
Yeah, I don't think the only reason Rem is allowed to be with Priscilla now is because that offer was made after Al left.
Yes.
Right.
Which I guess if Al does come back at any point in the near future, is going to be a huge point of contention, right?
Yeah, I wonder if that was a mistake. If you know what I mean, what I mean.
Oh, like a mistake from his perspective. Like
Yeah, Al's going to be like, I made a mistake letting Rem stay with, because now we have to go to the capital to take Rem back, and that means that Priscilla's leaving herself, doing something that she wouldn't normally do, which is ally with Amelia camp. And then it's just like, he's going to be like,
Because you're right as well, because he talked about before in a previous phase how him and Priscilla don't need anyone else. That pride of like, we could do this ourselves, right?
Which isn't entirely wrong. Any immediate situation Al can ensure goes their way.
can.
And long-term wise, Priscilla has a really good understanding of how to make things go her way.
But when does it go wrong? That's what I'm saying. I don't think it's going to be all rosy. Like, there's got to be a slip up at some point here, right?
well, I think everything's a slip up,
Oh, yeah.
in the sense of,
But I mean,
this, yeah.
this is all we're talking about long-term slip-ups in terms of Al's character flaws, right? But
Yeah,
I mean, like a
I-
short-term, like immediate slip-up we see.
I think the thing is, any bad thing that will happen that doesn't involve Al directly, he will take responsibility for because he feels like he can take responsibility for it when he is there. You know what I mean? Like, if only I was there, it would have went differently.
If only I wasn't the following star.
Yeah. If only I wasn't following and I was leading, And that's probably why he wants to try to change and establish himself as one of the key pillars to change the fundaments of reality itself.
On the subject of Al, one thing I did want to mention here, which I mentioned before this podcast started, but I want to discuss a little bit here, is I'm starting to believe more and more that Al is the traveler in these Stargazer prophecies, because we get a section here with Utakata, the daughter of Miuli.
Miruli.
Miruli, yes, Tarita's soul sister, and Miruli told her to also do this commandment. Not just Tarita, she told Utakata.
Mm-hmm.
And it's which is cool symmetry because we see Utakata also kill Subaru in the first phase. But it's also a thing of, I'm starting to feel like Subaru is an easy answer for this. I feel like it must be Al. I feel like Al he's either going to intentionally do it for some design of what he wants, or he's going to unintentionally cause this great disaster.
Possibly.
Yeah, and you know what I kind of thought about, and this is just more about, Volakia is the sun, right? Because the Yang sword gets the power from the to rule it means that you are the emperor of the sun in a sense, right? If Satella is the moon, right? Satellite, the moon. There's like a thing of like the moon coming up over the sun.
Yeah.
And I
Takes
think
over for it.
Yeah, takes over from at night. We got this mentioned in this chapter. And I wonder if the disaster on the Empire's scale means that it leaves a vacuum for the moon to take its place, if you know what I mean. Like something about the fall of the Empire having to do with the witches or something like that.
So what you're telling me is, when does someone in the immediate camp get the yin sword?
I mean, we'll talk about this in a second. There's something interesting about this chapter that I was thinking about, which I'm pretty sure about, which is the fact that, for example, the Yang sword, right, was made out of the same metal that Mesuria's, boomerang is made out of.
Well, she mentioned specifically that there were a set number of
10?
Like
10, yeah.
Okay, I couldn't remember if they actually said 10 or not yet. That there were 10, like, we'll call them legendary level blades. And this is made from the same metal as the likes of them. I don't know if that literally means it was carved from the same material that the sword was, only that her blade's hardness, ability is on the level of those legendary swords.
Well, I think it was insinuated that it said, I think I might have taken it down, that they were forged around the same time. And I think
the 10 were forged around the same time.
I think the material they're talking about is a meteorite, is my guess.
Yeah. That would make
the
more
Fallen
sense.
Star. And yeah, I think that has to do with like the influence that these weapons have, is my guess.
I mean, yeah, we've seen only a couple of these like ridiculous weapons. I think the only two that we know are the Yang sword and the Dragon sword.
Dragon sword.
Dragon sword,
Yeah, because
yeah.
Dragon sword is considered one of them. Yeah.
Mhm.
But this is my thing of, well, do you think we're ever going to see any of the other elemental swords or other legendary swords at some point? Because I think it'd be really cool if someone in the Amelia camp got the Yin sword.
Yeah.
If we're working on this rivalry camp stuff, it would feel so appropriate if someone in the Amelia camp got the Yin sword.
I wouldn't be surprised if one of the Divine General had these swords.
Oh, that's actually a good shout.
Mm-hmm. And I think that the other sword, I think the other swords are probably scattered about. I wouldn't be surprised if, I don't think we know anybody who has them like currently.
Yeah.
But I think maybe something weird like Halbel had one or something like that.
The only one I could think of is Cecilius maybe having one. That's the only person.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm thinking, I mean, I think we'll see all of them, is my guess. Because I think it's going to be more important as we go along. Like, when you have lore like that in your story, you don't not show it. You know what I mean?
And he's
Yeah, but 10 is a number that you can give to say that there are only that there's not very many of them. But you don't need to go all 10. If you need to show all of them, you say there's like 3 or 5.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true. But we've already seen 2 so far, so that means that we'll at least see a number of.
We'll see probably a couple more. But we probably won't see all of them. I don't imagine. Right? I feel like there's gonna be some that are like lost to time or legendary artifact that no one has discovered yet. Right? That kind of adds to the mystique and the history of the 400 years ago. There was so much more stuff going on. We just don't know about it.
I would guess 6. We'll see 6 of the legendary swords by the end of the series. If I had to put a wager on it.
Would you put a wager on what types or which ones we would make?
No, because I know things about like other ones that get mentioned, and at least, so I can't say anything else to that.
Bugger, that's a shame. That's exciting though.
I do think that like some of them are like, but the thing is, just by the nature of it, and I weapons probably made of the same material, is that they are like indestructible. You know what I mean? Or they're like every fantasy series has weapons made out of a certain type of metal, it's mithril or whatever. I think these weapons are made out of a metal that we're going to start hearing about of, and it's like, the only way to pierce a dragon's hide is with this metal, and that's the reason why, what's his face was able to kill all those dragons. Raid was able to kill those dragons because he was able to pierce them.
My assumption is that they are carved from pure mana, because part of the legend we hear about the dragon sword is that its hilt was carved by like a dragon's fang or claw or something.
That's part of it, yeah.
Would that technically be part of Volcanica still then?
Well, that's what I was getting to, is that when we get in one of the Amelia side stories, in order to like identify who's like allowed to come to the tower, Volcanica gives her like a piece of his nail, and they realize it's basically just solidified mana.
Yes.
So if there was a way that it was forged out of pure mana, like out of part of a dragon or part of a spirit, maybe, that it has that power to it.
Yeah.
My theory is probably this: the metal is a fallen star, and it's crafted by a dragon. There you go. That's the reason why she has a boomerang made of this metal, because the smith was a dragon kin or something like that.
From the way it's kind of, with how separate the dragon sword read seems to be from the idea of these elemental weapons, do you think it was one of the last dragon swords forged then, if we're going to go on that theory?
I think it may have just gotten its name from the person most well known of using it. And it's not necessarily just had its legend before that.
Right, do you know what? That's fair. That's fair.
Like a Sozin's Comet sort of thing.
Now I'm making some machinations, because this is the thing, from like a symmetry or like symbolism perspective, especially if Tepei is going to continue on what I think is the red herring of Subaru being the one who's going to cause the great disaster. Wouldn't it be really cool if he got the Yin sword as a way to like represent, I am the moon coming over fucking Volakia, right?
It is too cool to happen to Subaru.
But this is what I was going to say. It's too cool to happen to Subaru. It wouldn't work, right? But it's just a thing of how...
His Yin sword is Beatrice.
Wait, hold on. Do you reckon Owl's Dao is one of these swords?
It's called like the blue dragon sword, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, that's true. You're right. It looks. But
I thought it was like mentioned in one of the translator notes in Arc 5 that it's like the same word of dragon as the ground dragons. not like Volcanica.
But it's still a weird weapon, right?
It is.
It
yeah.
is.
It is the type of weapon that you would probably earn through fighting a bunch of people on an island or whatever, and then you steal from them, and you're like, oh, I have this grand artifact that I
Just kind of stole.
Yeah, I stole it from somebody else who was greater, who had this weapon before I did, and I used my authority and beat him. You know,
Yeah.
This artifact weapon.
That sounds like something I would do. Like, oh, I got this legendary tier loot.
Who knows? If I had to put a guess on it, there's likely at least some of the weapons may exist already and we just don't know yet.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what if one of them was broken up and reforged into Garfield's shields, for example?
Ooh.
Or it's not actually a weapon, it's a book that explains how to do a specific spell, but you need the book with you to use it. There's so many ways that you can make a legendary sword not be a sword anymore.
Yeah.
In a story that speculation could go on forever.
Which is why we'll probably stop it here, right?
Yes, that was going to be my tangent. So we have discussed Priscilla. She's got the divine, not the divine marriage. She has the soul marriage technique, her relationship with everyone else. I do want to touch real quickly on just Rem's role in this half of the phase.
Yes.
Where, despite her misgivings on herself, everyone else is recognizing her as the second most important person in the city right now.
Yep. And it's very confusing for Rem, right? She doesn't understand why people think of it this way. But they literally said Shudrak guards, Holly and Kuna, to come protect her, to keep the casualties down as much as possible. She is important.
The two who, short of Mazelda at her best, are their most lethal. Like, these are their best of their... Holly and Kuna together are the best of the best for the Shudrak, and they have her on Rem.
Yeah, and it speaks not only to the value of Rem, but also the value of healing magic, right? Because we even get a thing with Priscilla being like, I'm not a healing magic practitioner, but think of...
Yeah, not many in the Empire are.
But think of it as... Don't think of it as healing in that sense. Think of it as life force that you're manipulating, right? And we see like a really cool moment later on where Rem is manipulating that life force. Like, she's like actually is almost visualizing it, right?
Yeah.
And it's really, really cool. And it makes me think, because this is going past the small levels of healing Rem could do before, right? In Arc 2. Is she going to go beyond where she has gone in previous points? Because we even get mention of the fact that, oh, I'm really good at these household chores. These just come naturally to me. Maybe I was good at them before. What if Rem is going beyond in this healing magic way and she ends up actually becoming like a really, really powerful healer?
I think it might be that she starts to uncover unconventional ways that she's able to use healing. Because I remember that when I was reading through this the first time and there was all the discussion about her manipulating these life forces and reinterpreting what that means for her to heal someone up, and even being able to control how she heals someone with Flop. If the way that she gets to return her memories back is through her own power somehow, if she like figures out a way to connect with Louis and sort of heal her own memories out of this Archbishop.
Well, you know what's interesting about this is that, like, for example, Priscilla has a unique way of teaching out how to reframe her understanding of healing magic. And it makes sense that it comes from Priscilla because the way that she sees the world is more holistic than most people. In a sense,
everything's connected.
Everything's connected, right? And she, it's very funny because it's something that is just very easy to say. I think Priscilla understands intuitively that there's things called cells, you know. She understands that things are more deeply connected than looks like on the surface. Because she says to like Rem, she's like, hey, it looks like a cut, but it's not just a cut. There are deeper things they need to connect on like a baser level. Like Priscilla basically teaches Rem to consider spiritually, right? This is like a spiritual practice, to think of like knitting together everything, the essence of things, not just things that she can see, but like the very to the very like basis of where its existence lies, which I think makes sense. Like this sort of reframing of everything interconnected.
Well, if we go back to our discussion previously about how the physical body might just be a wrapper around the ode, if that is a deeper connection Priscilla's getting Rem to build upon and establish, which might be how she gets this way to get her memories back eventually, is through repairing of the ode somehow.
Yeah, exactly. That I was gonna say, right, that and also I'm gonna cook a little bit in that sense of maybe Rem will be the one that fixes Subaru's ode at some point later in the story and brings him back to, regular Subaru instead of Shota Baru. And I think because of the way they've been separated, it's probably not going to happen till the end of probably the next arc is my guess. And what's going to happen is going to be like an antithetical force to Olbart's ode manipulation, where Rem is using it as a way to heal people and restore them to what their ode actually is in a lot of ways. Well, she might be able to help other gluttony victims in that sense.
Yeah, but if it's like, for example, the way that Priscilla or Yorna sees their soul marriage technique, and that's the reason why Priscilla is able to guide her this way, right? Because she has this understanding of the soul marriage technique. What if Rem is able to heal people through love? And that sounds corny, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, I'm totally with you on that. Like, it's possible that she's going to be able to have these connections, because we've seen the power that the emotional and familial bond that exists between her and Rom are able to do, to the level that with the catalyst of Subaru's authority, that Rem was able to act as the battery for Rom to go through it. So after maybe even just learning or seeing Olbart use his ode manipulation to change someone's form, either to bring them younger or to restore them to the way they were, Rem might be able to uncover a new way of handling that, of manipulating the ode like that. Whether it is just to undo Shota Baru, or if it's able to find something else. Maybe she's able to restore Rom's horn.
Oh my god, I didn't even think of that.
That'd be crazy.
Because that would be attached to her ode, because it's a physical part of her body.
Physical. Well, yeah, it's your ode manifesting your physical representation. Yeah.
Oh,
and that's actually, interesting point too. And I think about this, and the more that I think about it, it's like that could be a huge part, because we know that Rem. I'm not sure how to say this, and let me know if you keep me here. If Ram is a manifestation of a wind goddess, and quote, the wind goddess Dodi, right? Oni, right?
I think they just called her the
Oni god, right?
Or like manifestation of the Oni god.
Right.
Which is either folktale or a piece of lore that's not been touched on since.
Yeah, exactly. But even if it's folktale, here's my perspective. If Ram got the ode of the power of magic, then what if Rem got the ode of the power of the form, the strength? Like the being able to manipulate form instead of just shape the physical world.
Because
you know what I mean?
As twins, they would share in something, right?
Yeah. So this like magical manifestation that is, I'm affecting the outside world, is what Ram does, where Rem, affects the inside world. And that is part of the power that is, was given to Rem instead of Ram.
And that's another thing along the lines of, they each had to divide up those two horns into one horn each.
But what if, this is another thing that's kind of a joke, but it's kind of like, what if, because Rem had two horns to one, right? Rem, she never had a horn, right?
Rem? She does.
Yeah. She does have a horn, right? Yeah. I was just thinking about the fact that, like, the way that horns work is that if it, is inside you rather than outside of you, if it's like, maybe her horn works better when it's inside of herself, if that makes sense. Like the manifestation of
the horn itself, exposing it, I think it's just in general a way to increase the amount that it's able to pull in at one point in time, which overcharges them like a steroid. Because Rem gets crazy strong and powerful when she pulls it out, but it also, the first time, made her lose her mind. We saw when Rom had hers out as a little kid, she was taking out the entire witch cult single-handedly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, what I'm thinking about is, like, I do wonder where that path, right? Because if what the folktale says is true, that twins share each other's power, then Rem has that power laying dormant somewhere inside of her, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
I think that it is possible that that is absolutely true. I mean, she had enough power to let Rom go all out on her own. So Rem has as much as Rom does as well. Rom was just gifted with that prodigy level ability of wind magic.
She's just
and that's why they focused on her.
Yeah.
But if, as they mentioned here, the Oni are cut above every other like race of humanoid,
Which
that
is
to
why
the point that they were considered on par with the Dragonkin, then Rem's got something within her. Something crazy strong and powerful that we just haven't really seen yet.
There's hidden potential, just like how there's hidden potential in a lot of these characters, and they are having to realize it, you know? This is what I feel like this arc is really about. It's like, you know, we're going back to our roots. We've lost a lot of ourselves. We've got to rebuild ourselves from the ground up and understand that it wasn't about the fact we never had potential. It's that we never allowed ourselves to use it. Because Rem talks about in some of these chapters how she's frozen in time, like how she was in Arc 2, right? And how Subaru was in my opinion, I feel like Subaru was kind of frozen in time. He's not, especially in his scenario with like his life on Earth, but also even in his point of development of like, he's gone down the wrong path. He's not realizing his potential. He's trying to force himself into an identity. He's not really who he's supposed to be. And it makes me think a lot of these characters are reinventing themselves. Abel is reinventing himself. Like, that's clear. He's reinventing himself in some way. He refers to himself as Abel specifically. Now, obviously that there's like logistical reasons for that, but I feel like there's something deeper and symbolically going on there.
These are a lot of parallels with Subaru as well, with him representing himself differently, Abel representing himself differently. Rem is taking on a name that she doesn't even believe is hers. You know, like it's all these different characters who are associating themselves with things that they didn't expect themselves to be, you know.
Rem, in this phase especially, though, Rem is also discovering that she is the person that they claim to be, even when she doesn't understand it. Because when she's like pulled away at the end here, she has the feeling away from it, she has that feeling of emptiness of Subaru being gone. Like she does still love him. That's built into her mind, and she doesn't understand why it's like that.
I'm actually going to read the quote for that because it's quite short and it's so good. Would pain run through his heart when he learned Rem was gone? A pain in his heart, just like Rem's own, which felt like a blade piercing deep into her heart. From where these sorts of thoughts in her mind originated, Rem did not know.
This is the same thought she had before she was eaten by gluttony, in a sense.
Yeah.
It's I hope that he at least feels a sad pang in his heart when he realizes that I'm gone.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Also, before this, when she is she's standing up to what's her face?
Ollie?
No.
Madeline?
Madeline, sorry. I almost said Mesoria. When she's sent to Madeline, right? She says that she is she's like, I'm acting like that guy. Like when she's like being indignant and being like, no, I won't. You'll kill me and then you'll lose.
Yes.
You know, that's the type of thing that Subaru would say, because obviously he doesn't care about, like, he knows the value of life, right? And that's something that she was taught by him to act like, you know, be like, hey, I know how valuable life is. You're going to lose if you kill me, you know, and you're just going to kill somebody just for the sake of doing so. Is that what life, you know, if that's what the value of life is to you, then go ahead, you know. That's where her taunt was totally her reflecting the values that she respects about Subaru.
In that sense, then, it just makes so much symbolic sense of why Rem is embracing that role as a healer, right? Of like,
because it's the one thing that she's really been able to do herself. That whether it's a connection to who she was before or not, it is something that she can do now. That provincial Rem, just like original Rem, is a healer.
Yes, I'm really curious about it. Do we want to talk about the last little bits of Rem stuff here now while we're on her subject?
Yeah, let's talk about Rem's last parts here. Rem, she sticks up to Madeline when Madeline is shocked to learn that Flop, he has this weird talon, this dragon talon necklace, who is possessed by a dragon that she knows. and she wounded Flop, and then, Rem is healing Flop, but then Flop says, "Don't heal me all the way." And she had to stop for a moment. I love this part of the writing where she's like, "What? What did he say?" She's like,
"Yeah,
I don't know if I should do this, but he said it pretty convincingly, so I guess I'll take his word for it. I'll trust him, right?" And I love the bond that Flop has with both wife and husband, right? Because Flop is very shrewd, as we've come to learn throughout this arc, and the way that I think it shows that Rem really respects Flop, because she listens to the asinine thing that Flop requests of her, and it turns out to be the right decision, because by kind of holding this, hey, because nobody else knows healing magic in Volakia, really, holding this sort of threat above her head is like, hey, either I'll heal him, or you pull out with all your dragons, and then I'll heal him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just very cunning and shrewd. But yeah, that happens, and unplanned on Rem and Flop part probably is that she kidnaps both of them, and she's like, well, fine, if you're going to hold this over your head and want us to leave, then I'll do that.
I think it was planned on Flop's part. I think it's explicitly why he didn't want to be healed all the way, was so that she would have to wait for him to recover to get the information from him.
Yeah.
Right, but I think it was also Flop wanting to have Rem make that ultimatum for her, which is let the Sky Dragons, the attack to kind of fall back, because I don't think he thought that they probably could survive the attack if it was just, up to keeping it going. Or maybe he didn't want all those people to die, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. He is really against anybody dying.
Which we're going to talk more when we get to Flop, because he's a whole thing we'll be talking about.
Yeah.
But
Rem is taken to the capital and meets this horrid gentleman, Prime Minister Fondlefon.
Yeah.
Horrible name.
My God.
Some of the names in Volakia especially are just so silly. Like Zakir Osman,
is the most normal, honestly.
It is the most normal, but even though it's the most normal, it still doesn't sound just right. It's like Depay is playing with like what he thinks like Western aristocratic names would sound like, right?
I don't think anyone on Earth would believe that a Western person's name would be Medium O'Connell.
Yeah, honestly, well, you could tell by the way that the names are given what character he likes better, because Medium O'Connell sounds like a whimsical Western name. It's like, ooh, Medium O'Connell, or Flop is a cute name,
Yeah.
And then it's just like, Old Bart Dunkelkin. It's just like a gross, ugly old man's name,
Belstart's Fondlefon. Fuck it. It's just such a strange.
Belstart's, yeah.
Yeah. That's how it's gonna be said. It's gonna be so wild. Can you imagine anime onlys? Like, if we ever get to the this part being animated, they're just like, the fuck is this guy?
With the Brock eyes too.
Yeah. Oh,
deranged old man look.
But we learn some really interesting stuff from this Prime Minister Burstets, because he just straight up admits, yeah, I'm the enemy of His Excellency. He straight up knows what he's doing. He's the one in charge here. He's the one orchestrating this, and he knows it. And he's honest to Rem about it. I was not from the impression Abel had described him as like this conniving mastermind. I'd not expected him to just be straight up as at least seemingly forthcoming as he is to Rem here.
It's not like anyone's going to believe her.
Well, another thing is that he wants to try to, like, he is obviously a gross old man, and that is something that he cannot separate from himself. Much as he tries, he's not a charismatic sort, right? That's something that Rem was kind of noticing too. Is like, this guy, I don't really like him much, right? But he was still trying to be like, well, maybe I need an Oni to join the Divine Generals, because that sounds really strong. Like that sort of like, he's trying to put on a good face for her sake.
Yeah, he's very much looking for an in with her. I can't, like, this was clearly not the goal, was to get her from this attack, but it's an unexpected windfall on his part.
Yeah,
he would be stupid to throw it away.
Yeah, to throw it away. Yeah,
that's what he said. And he's like, Madeline was supposed to win. You know, he wasn't expecting her to lose. You know, but he was glad that Madeline brought home an Oni, right?
Yeah, a great war prize. It's and then we just learn some interesting stuff about the political situation that Abel has not really mentioned, and it puts a lot of context into things. So we learn that Burstets is just open and like, my plan went to blunder. You know, I shouldn't have let Abel escape, and I'm disappointed that the fortress city wasn't completely destroyed as I commanded Madeline to do. And we get a bit of his philosophy here, which I don't know, again, like if he's being truthful about this part, but he says, we do not seek individual personality in the Emperor, the pinnacle of the nation. Personal feelings and attachments are trivial. From the perspective of running a nation, if there is anything to look for, that would only be competence and the trust and performance of a person able to fulfill their responsibilities. And then Rem clearly sees the hypocrisy in this because she's like, wait, hold on. Abel is extremely competent. You're saying you ousted him because he's incompetent and unfit to be emperor? And Burstets is like, ousting was not my intention. That is merely hindsight. So we then learn after this that the reason, and he gets very emotional and like angry about it, that the reason he orchestrated all of this is because Abel refused to have kids. As a man of the Empire, as a man who seems to have made himself rise to the top as Prime Minister, I imagine he would want a traditional imperial succession to be set up in the vein of multiple, as many successors as possible, battling out to become the greatest emperor, right?
But you know what I think is very interesting about this? Is how stupid it is.
Yeah.
And because,
I'm a total agreement. It's a ridiculous motive.
But also, one thing that I kind of thought about just now is that Vincent knows probably acutely more so than anyone as somebody who survived that selection and somebody who's not dumb and arrogant enough to believe that that was a normal thing to do, to kill all your siblings to become.
He also didn't do it. He let Priscilla go.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, he let Priscilla go on purpose, but he still had to kill some other of them, right? I don't think that was something that he liked doing. You know, I think he probably saw the pain in some of his siblings' eyes when he had to kill them, right?
Technically, we only know that he had to be the last one around.
Right. But
it's possible Priscilla killed, like, if it was down to those three, Priscilla kills one, and then he tells her to run away so he doesn't have to kill her.
Right.
Regardless of the context of it, it led to his family tearing itself apart.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
And I think he realized that it was an unfortunate thing because I think he would rather he and Priscilla live like normal brother and sister. He probably resents the whole process. That's probably why he doesn't want to have children, because he doesn't want to do that to his own children, because he's a normal person, or like at least semi-normal, you know, normal enough to care about your family.
He's still Emperor of Volakia, but he's normal enough. Yeah,
yeah. He wouldn't just have kids just so that they could eventually kill themselves over the position that he once had.
Which is why he's so hesitant to marry people, and why he didn't want to offer up his hand in marriage to Yorna. And
It's also recontextualizes his play of making Subaru his illegitimate son.
Exactly.
Because that invalidates Burset's entire reason for rebelling in the first place.
Now, whilst I do think, and I don't think it's, I think that it's stupid on purpose. Like, I think Burstets is being emotional and arrogant and pig-headed by doing what he does. But when he mentions the fact that him ousting him was not intentional, I have a feeling it was more of like, I'm going to by force make the Emperor have this setup and have these children, and Abel like denied it and had to flee. That's my imagining of what happened. And so to continue on the government, that's when some of the using the imposter with Chisha Gold worked out.
Well, according to Abel, the plot against him was orchestrated by Chisha and Burstets together.
Yes, but I think that's what the plot was initially, because he says it wasn't initially to oust him, right?
But that wasn't his intention, was to oust him.
Yeah.
But the fact that that was a possibility at all, again, just reinforces to me how ridiculous Burstet's plan is. Because what he has done now is removed the person who proved to be the most competent person to be emperor by winning that selection, and doesn't acknowledge that that means that Abel's point of view, perspective, and decisions should be better heated than his own.
But that plays into his arrogance, right? And this isn't a thing that I'm finding interesting about his character. I think a lot of this characterization comes from a level of like him feeling like he's the one who's actually in charge. He's the one who's actually like who makes the better decisions, who's wiser, right? It comes from a place of like conceit and arrogance.
I think his arrogance comes from a place that is wholly unique to the arrogance that we respect in Volakia.
Yes.
And as a reader, it's pretty obvious to me. It's just that his arrogance stems from his ability to understand the legacy of the culture of Volakia, and that alone. You know, it's not the type of arrogance that stems from, you know, like cleverness, you know, like foresight, the ability to like read situations, you know, like anything like that. All he's baking on is the thing that us, as we're following all these young people who are trying to make and reshape the nature of this world, all that this guy is supposed to represent is the bad and old legacy that is bigoted and sort of like, you know, mistaken or just misshapen, you know, like a stale culture that has no purpose besides, you know, upholding values that are no longer needed or sensible at all.
Yeah. It's very much a thing of like where a lot of people, this is a generalization obviously, where a lot of people feel that a lot of politicians, they always come from an angle of wanting their power for the sake of like, even if they don't believe it, like a cultural thing they appeal to. But in a lot of sense, a lot of the time, the thing that becomes a politician's downfall is that inability to empathize and to see the human side of things, right? Like, because Abel, whilst being a politician who can be ruthless and make tough decisions, is a man who I believe is in touch with his humanity, and that is the reason why he has decided not to have successors, and that is the reason why he's decided not to go for a relationship, and which is why the importance of him offering his hand to Yorna is like so big in the story, and retroactively that makes it even more important, right?
It does.
I think in another interesting way, I think lends credit to the idea that Tepei is just stating with Burstets as a character, like, as you said, Gold, the bigoted old guard, the one that isn't willing to change, the one that comes up with the stupid plans that you know conceivably won't work, but he's doing it out of like some sort of cultural, like primal desire, right? Is literally anti-reform in that sense, right? Like, because what Abel would be doing if he carries along with what he's desiring, I think, would be reforming the idea of what the Empire is.
Yeah, we already saw that with the way he structured the military.
He even refuses to use the Yang sword, right? Like, that's an element to his character. Now, obviously, I don't know if both him and Priscilla can wield it, or if he's letting Priscilla wield it. But if there's an element of he could have chose to use it this entire time, he is choosing not to because he doesn't want that to be the way he builds his authority, right? As Emperor.
All true.
My curiosity here is how does him... Well, because by him stating that Subaru is his illegitimate child, he completely removes all of the pretend justification that Burstets and his faction has, and at that point it all becomes a casus belli or like a political idea. It's not real. It's not what they want. You know, it's not their ambitions. As we see with Madeline, hers is vengeance. Burstets is probably his arrogance and his anti-reform ideas and his ambition, right? Like, for a lot of these characters, is that really what they desire? The only character that I hold that in potential different idea is maybe Chisha Gold, from the way we've seen Vincent be characterized in the story so far. It seems like there's something different going on with him that's separate from all of that, at least in my opinion. But by doing that, Abel has thrown the table over in this political game. So the ball is now in their court. They have to decide what they're going to do with it. And it's a brilliant move on Abel's part, honestly. It's going to make Subaru's life a living hell, though, and he is never going to forgive him, ever. I do not think.
It is, but we're going a little long here, so before we run out of time entirely, let's move to flop.
Yes. Flop,
Okay.
flop.
There's also one more thing I want to touch, which is the fight between Amelia and Priscilla as well.
Yeah, we can touch on that real quick.
Yeah, the things I want to mention with that. Yeah.
Right. So in that fight, I thought it was hilarious that Amelia just thinks some random person is being really rude to her before she realizes it's Priscilla.
Yeah.
That's really funny to me.
Amelia is just bad at recognizing people. Doesn't recognize Regulus after that year, doesn't? Yeah.
Well, I imagine she landed down in front of Priscilla and didn't see who it was until she turned around.
Yeah, but it's just a funny theme that Amelia just doesn't initially recognize people. Could that be a similar thing that happens, like if she sees Shotobaru, for instance? That's what I'll just throw that out there. But yeah, it'd be a funny gag.
They are so fun. Like, I think Amelia is very funny in this scene. I don't know. Like, the other thing that we talked about before in the side story is that Amelia is written better. Something about Amelia being written recently to me has just felt a lot better than it used to be.
Yes,
I don't know what it is. I think like one thing that I kind of noticed in this, and this is just, I don't know if any of you have played or seen Final Fantasy VII, but Amelia acts like Aerith to me in these scenes, and I kind of put something together. I think that's what Teppei wants her to seem like, more so than anything.
That's
like, just sort of like airheaded, innocent, but kind of
absolutely, yes, yeah, he does.
Like this sort of straightforward, like righteous person who is able to say cutting and mean things sometimes, but is like kind of clueless about the way they do it. I think like it's just, but yeah, they work in tandem here so well, and it feels so epic the way that they fight between Madeline here.
And then like against Mazelda as well later on.
Yeah,
or Mizoria, not Mazelda.
Yeah, Mizoria. Yeah, and like the way that they kind of bounce off each other here, the quips are just so great. And yeah, another thing that I noticed that Amelia says Ice Age in English, which all I want to say is that this is a One Piece reference.
It probably is. You have to imagine Subaru's coming up with the names of her attacks.
Yes, because Ice Age is what
later she gets it from Subaru.
Yeah, what Kuzan says in is one of his attacks, the guy with ice powers. And another thing is that like, yeah, I just love the way that they work together in this way. The art of them working together, like the ice and the fire, you know, like red, blue. Yeah, it does feel like a Dragon Ball Z fight when they're deflecting the beam from the sky and stuff like that. But just the way in which like they're like flying and doing, like the narrator says that like the perspective, somebody who saw this fight of these three beautiful women fighting in this like speed, they would think it's a dream. Just the fact that they're able to fight on equal footing. And you know what's interesting? Like Madeline, she's able to kind of keep up somewhat. You know, eventually she gets overwhelmed because Frost kind of counters dragons completely. It seems. But
Pokemon reference. Ice is super effective against dragons.
True. That's a good point. But she's very durable too. That's something that the narrator also noticed, is that like there's a durability aspect here. That like if she wasn't a dragon, she wouldn't survive a lot of these attacks.
We also learn, I believe for the first time, that the Yang Sword can only be drawn when the sun is visible or like out.
Right. Yeah. And you know, sometimes it says the sun did not always shine. For half of a day, it shared responsibility with the moon, using the time to build up its strength. I think this is a funny like characterization of the sun. Like the sun is being like animized here. Like the sun is building up its strength during the time the moon is sharing its responsibilities.
Well, they are in a flat world. The sun has to be moving around them, not the other way around in that case.
I'm like, this is weirdly literal. Like, or like the narrator saying this, but it feels like this is like a spiritual like idea in the world. You know what I mean?
It very much feels
like the sun is a giant ball of yin magic in the sky that just moves around the planet.
Exactly. I just feel like that speaks to the spiritual understanding of the world of ReZero in such a uniquely ReZero way. It feels so it just feels so authentic to it. You know what I mean? It's really cool. One other thing I wanted to mention about this fight was just I really enjoyed reading it. I think in a lot of earlier earlier parts in the ReZero story, reading some fights can be kind of not very entertaining. Whereas the idea of the fight and the concepts that it presents are really cool, but just the way it's written with how literal the descriptions are from DePay sometimes.
And it's too much of a slog. There's two piece by piece. It doesn't flow together too well.
But here,
this seemed actually pretty to the point, but also eloquently put.
Where things needed to be described, they were, and it didn't feel overtly in my face all the time. So I could actually imagine what was happening instead of just reading it as a textbook. Almost.
Yeah, it felt more poetic than it did beforehand.
Absolutely, and I can promise you is a trend that continues through Arc 7, is the fights become something that as you're reading them, you do visualize them instead of reading them and having to think about what that means.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Yeah, because in this fight, for example, there was no left arm deflects the thing, and then the right, kicks out, and then the knee collides with this, and it's okay, we don't need to.
Garfield punched Kurgan in the face.
Yeah.
Kurgan punched Garfield in the face with his right arm, with 3 fingers.
Yeah. I'm glad we're thinking of the same fight for a really cool fight, but really difficult to read.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why in the anime it's going to be fucking awesome.
100%.
But one other thing I'll mention about this fight is that we get a very interesting narration bet where it's just the fortress city is no more because all of the walls have been knocked down, so it can't be a fortress city anymore. So, and also a thing of because of this, and because now Chaos Flame has been destroyed simultaneously, the Able faction has no defensible position right now.
No, not at all. They'll have to start going west because to the east is just the Shudrakian forest, which, if I remember, still had a decent chunk of it burned.
Yeah.
And now they have a good reason to go to the capital.
And it's also,
and there's mob beasts in there for some reason.
Yeah. It's because it is closer to the Lagunicum border, right?
Not near the Shudrak village. That's on the southern border.
But the forest extends up towards the border. It's a very big one, right? At least from what I remember.
It is.
So they could have traveled in through there. But my thing is, right, they are kind of strategically fucked right now because the force that just attacked them wasn't even the official cavalry force of the Empire. They're still stationed in the capital, to my knowledge, which means...
Well, I would call the army of flying dragons your primary cavalry force.
Yes, but I mean the official flying dragon detachment of the Valakian army wasn't sent here.
That's true.
Which means that because they have no defensible position, Abel's faction is in a really bad spot right now, because if they deploy them and they're like fleeing out in the open to try and get to somewhere, they are super vulnerable, right? Which
at the moment, yeah, they don't really have any
situation. Which, like, I'm just saying, if anyone on the other side takes initiative, it's going to be a difficult couple bits of time. Which is, I think, man, Subaru's time is not looking good. I'm just saying, man, Abel's fucked him so bad. He's gonna go through so much, and I can't wait to read it. But I think
certainly will go through a lot. Well, we have Flop still.
I was about to say, the only thing I want to talk about, which is the thing I've probably been wanting to talk about the most now I think about it, is Flop.
Yeah.
So we get his name chapter.
Yeah,
yes.
We did get his name chapter. And, I think Flop in this, shows himself very well with his reaction with the kids and stuff like that. And then, we get in the very beginning him talking about how he became strong, and it kind of starts there where he was talking about the fact that, he's lived a life that has been through a lot of pain. But he's also, had a lot of support from his sister, and his sister became strong to help him. I think that, talk with Schultz was one of the times where you're like, oh, I understand, he even feels kind of bad about that, but he feels optimistic about it at the same time. the fact that he feels like he has a responsibility to give to the world. He's moving with his best foot forward.
Yeah.
And we hear a bit about, I think, like the first time they mentioned like Miles and stuff like that.
Yes, his benefactor. So this was something that I wanted to ask you both, and I brought this up to Wolf right before we started recording. Do you recognize that name, Gold?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay, so Wolf, if you don't remember, Miles was the Necromancer from EX1.
That is where I thought he was coming from. I was disconnected from it so much because it didn't seem like the Miles we see here, but that was him?
Yeah, it's the same guy. And then Reinhardt ends up killing him a few years after this flashback.
Oh my god, that makes so much sense.
And doesn't he fly on a dragon?
He does.
Yeah, he's on a flying dragon on his way back.
Yeah.
You're right. Oh my god, that makes so much more sense now. And because he was involved in trying to weaken Lagunica from the inside with all that stuff. Okay, that makes so much more sense. Thank you. I was like, I remember this name from somewhere, and I thought it was EX1. Thank you for reminding me. That helps a lot. The other thing here that I think is really interesting is just how Flop finds the source of his strength and how you can already see, even in his early years, like proving, I think without a doubt, the kind of like genuinely wonderful and good person that Flop is. Because he's in a terribly abusive situation as he's growing up in this orphanage. But even despite all of this like obstacles and all of these things that are in his way and him straight up being a victim, he doesn't let his victimhood take over from the fact that he has people to protect and he wants to protect them. Because he draws attention on himself at the orphanage to prevent the adults from hurting the other kids and his sister as much as possible. When I was reading this section, I think this is one of the few times where I've started reading at the beginning of a chapter of ReZero and started to cry, because it was a really emotional, like, just confrontation of his own abuse in a really beautiful way, and it felt very authentic and respectful. It didn't feel like just a thing to pay it attached to a character, it felt real. And it made me empathize with him a lot. And it explains all of his exaggerated mannerisms in conversation and such, because that was his weapon against the people that hurt him.
Yeah, his backstory with the orphanage is tragic, and we learn that while it seemed like he had an upside in the middle, it returned again to tragedy. That his brother, in pretty much everything but blood, has since been slain, supposedly, by Vincent, one of the former Divine Generals, Baleroy.
Yeah.
And that's the Divine General that Madelyn replaced, that Madelyn was betrothed to, and that Madelyn is trying to avenge by becoming a Divine General.
Which is pretty crazy. I mean, I want to talk a bit about that sort of thing. This sort of relationship with the Divine General, like Baleroy, means that his, who he is as a person is something that we're going to have to learn. We're probably going to figure out through either Flop or Madelin's flashbacks.
Yeah.
I just know this vaguely, but he's also one of the main parts of EX4, I think it is.
Yes, he is heavily featured in EX4.
So, yeah, I wonder if that's something that we would eventually find value in reading because of that reason.
That is definitely
I have regretted not reading through all of EX4 before where I'm at in Arc 8, so it will be something that we're going to go through after we finish 7 for sure.
7,
after 7, yeah. So that's what I was thinking too. Because now it feels even more prudent to do so.
Yeah.
Knowing what I know now about Madeline and Flop and stuff like that. Because, like the fact that he was called the Flying Dragon General, right?
Yes.
And that he seemed to raise this flying dragon out of this egg.
One that Flop was there for the birth of.
Yeah. And that's very interesting to me, because now I'm wondering who he was as a person. How did he find this egg? How do you find Madeline? Because like Madeline seems like this part of this ancient race of people, but this guy was able to rizz her up or something like that. Whatever it may be. It opens up and it expands more, because if the rest of this story of the conflict about the Emperor being replaced by this fake Emperor hinges more emotionally on this fact about Madeline's relationship with Baleroy and stuff like that, I'm now wondering if there's a part of this arc in which Flop sort of replaces that for Madeline or something like that, which is to say that, yes, to pay. I know you're trying to set up Flop with, what's her face? Terida, or whatever her name is.
Yeah.
With Tarita? Yeah.
Yeah, Terida. But no, I do not wish that fate on him. Now I'm shipping him with Madeline.
There was one other character that we only see very briefly, but does get mentioned here in his backstory, and that is his effectively adopted mother's case here, the one that brings him and medium in of the Countess Serena Dracoy.
Yeah, that is something I want to pay attention to because she is also Priscilla's current collaborator.
Mm-hmm.
I want to meet this woman, like, fully, like, because we see a small amount of dialogue from her, but she seems really interesting.
She seems like she's also a part of this flying dragon sort of thing. Like she has her name is Lily Drakeroy, all right?
Yeah.
And Baleroy had his egg when living at her place.
Yeah.
So she seems to maybe be the person that we start learning more about dragon lore from, about like modern dragon lore.
That would make sense.
And like give you a bit about context about who Mesri is, how Mesri is around, how to fight these flying dragons in the first place. You know, I was surprised if, they fight Madeline again and they have to fight those dragons once more. But to fight them in the sky, we're going to have to, have Serena help us or something like that.
But yeah, as Baleroy's dragon aged when they were younger together, and he grew in a new set of teeth, the old fangs were giving out to Medium, Flop, and him as a showing of their family, their sworn family. Mm-hmm. And it's really sad that Flop and Medium kind of found this foundation in Baleroy and they lost it. But in a way that's like, they almost as if they were like, if there was any way he was going to die, it was trying to do good things. Because we get a passage from Flop where he describes Baleroy as like a kind, wonderful person that rose up in rebellion for seemingly some sort of just reason, right? But it feels like that's conniving because we, as we've said before, Madeline believes that it's Vincent Volakia or Abel that killed Baleroy. But it's with the way Madeline is being manipulated by Burets, it feels like it's a perfect, like, just setup to overthrow the Emperor on his heart, or like his planning. It doesn't make sense to me for Abel, from a character or political perspective, to completely get rid of Baleroy and for it to go down the way it did here. So I feel like
it's almost assuredly like sent out on a mission that got him killed. It is Abel's direct fault or action.
Burets' faction killed him.
That's possible. Though I don't think in the time that Abel's been gone, they would have been able to get a new divine general as important as seeming as Madeline is
that's
in place. The only thing I can say for certain is that he was present in EX4, which I think is 2 years before Subaru shows up.
Because can we talk about like it? I only know the general premise of the novel. Like I won't talk about like specifics because I don't.
The story takes place 6 months before, or 4 to 5 months before the start of the main story.
And it's the whole point.
About 2 years before now, then.
Yes.
So the whole point is it's Lagunican Knights in Volakia, right? Because it's like a diplomatic mission, from what I remember.
Correct.
So yeah, that I think after we finish Arc 7 will definitely be a read on our list for sure.
100%.
The main character is Julius, and
that's awesome.
And
sure is.
Yeah, I really enjoy Flop's characterization. And one last thing I'll mention here at the end is Flop kind of like empathizes with Madeline's feelings about wanting revenge, where he's like, but I want revenge on a more grand scheme. But with the way it's written, it seems to me, especially as they come to the like conclusion of like who killed Baleroy, that maybe Flop is going to have a bit of a conflict here. Because whilst Flop we see as like unabashedly like a good person, do you feel because of this information it's gonna, even though I don't think it may change Flop completely and he'll just completely ditch that, do you think he would be conflicted in whether he would work with Abel or not after this, at least for a bit?
Based on who Flop has shown himself to be, I think he would want to get his explanation first.
Yes.
Because his revenge has never been targeted at a person.
It's the world. Yeah.
It's targeted at the world, which from Priscilla's words, we might even consider like the actual ire of who Flop wants to have revenge on would be like the Observers, or Oblagna or something, in which he's defying fate by being a good person that doesn't continue the cycle of abuse. Which is why he doesn't like want anyone ever to die if he's involved. He doesn't want to have that on him. So if I were to guess, having only read up to this point, I would have assumed that Flop had no intention of hurting Abel, and that he might have some other machinations for how to take revenge on the world in a more positive way.
Yeah.
But I think he might see Madelin's pain in that way.
Oh, absolutely he does.
And I think that's why I'm saying what I'm saying about their relationship kind of growing that way. So I think that he has the opportunity to see past the I'm a dragon, I'm just a dragon thing, and try to empathize with her more as a person-to-person sort of basis.
Yes. Flop is also the ticket to where Madeline, I think, as a Divine General, is going to end up siding. Because the numbers of Divine Generals on each side is important. As we were emphasized earlier on in this arc, like, we need them on our side, because otherwise we're kind of screwed.
Yeah, but, I mean, Yorna's a big piece.
She is.
Like, we've shown that she was able to combat the unbridled power of Satella pissed off.
Yes.
Yorna is a huge factor. Again, it kind of points to the fact that the ranking number you are isn't really relevant to your ability as a combatant.
It's way
which
more
is what
tied.
Abel really needs.
Yeah, it's not like a true understanding of strength, because it's a title. It's not really. It's almost like seniority, right, rather than power, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Because
it's also like authority. I think
Authority.
It's like you're the top ranking, because clearly Baleroy was fairly young.
Yeah.
When he was made a Divine General,
And Cecilius was too, but he's the exception, not the rule, right?
yeah, and him and Arakia are unknowable monsters that put them up to that level. But like number 3, I believe it was mentioned, was Chisha, who was not a combatant at all.
I think 3's Olbart. I think 4 is Chisha.
That's probably true.
Maybe the other way around. I forget.
But are we good talking about Flop here? Because there's one last thing I'd like to mention before we wrap up for today.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jamal's back, baby!
Jamal! He's alive.
He's alive, and he's on our side. He was in the prisons. Sakir released him to press him into service. Jamal was seemingly impressed by Zakir's way of explaining what's going on and his loyalties lie. So we might see Jamal fight for Abel. Jamal! Oh, wait, does that mean we're going to get a confrontation between Jamal and Todd? Dun dun dun.
Oh yeah. 100%.
Oh yeah, baby. Oh, it's going to be good. It's going to be good.
It's gonna
drama.
happen.
It's going to be
gonna
cool.
happen.
Let's not forget Jamal's sister, Todd's fiance, is in the Imperial capital.
Yeah.
That's
Would be a big motivation for him, right?
What'd be crazy is if like a lot of the Divine Generals flip on the situation, right? But Todd is like still loyal to Burets for whatever reason, or who knows? And then he's like one of the Divine Generals of that opposing force, I would guess.
I think if any side Subaru is on, Todd is going to be on the opposing side because of Subaru being the literal nightmare from his nightmares.
Imagine what happens when he starts to think that the woman that he's seen as the poster child of war is actually the mother of the bastard prince of the empire.
Exactly. That's exactly what I thought that was going to... Oh, that's just fucking... Oh, that's going to be so funny. My thing is here. I think Todd is going to be one that's going to be like, right, we got to go out and subjugate this illegitimate child, this literal demon spawn. I feel like Todd may show up in the next phase. That's a speculation on my part, or the end of the next phase to be a big threat for Subaru. An idea I have is like, I'm kind of, because Abel's done this with the whole illegitimate child thing, that's going to make the legitimacy of Burstedt's cause really big into question, especially for a lot of the Divine Generals that may have sided with him because of his cultural reasons, right? No
I think that's only Chisha, though. I don't think the others know.
No, but I mean, like, that could be an influencing factor in how people determine their positions, even in the future, with negotiations, right?
I mean, possibly. That's
why I'm thinking this is Abel's like master plan. This is how he turns the tables. But obviously, because it's ReZero, stuff is going to go wrong for the heroes along the way, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I know I've said this, Bolter. I'm so worried for Subaru. This is not good. This is all good. It's going to be interesting to read, but oh god.
This next phase is going to stress your Subaru limit out.
Oh wow.
Let's not forget the last phase. We finally learned what Tappe meant by taking the gloves off for dealing with Subaru. He didn't ever say he's putting them back on.
No. In fact, I feel like maybe he's already taken them off, but there was an extra pair of gloves under that, and he's taken those off now too.
I think a lot of our ideas about Shotobryu and all these different stuff will come to a head in the next phase.
Yep.
Is my guess. This idea of like what it means or like what hero he'll be. I think that my prediction for the next phase is going to be mostly about that.
I think it's going to be about Subaru surrounded by strangers and people that barely know him. Like even Tanza, the only person that he's like somewhat acquainted with, does not know who Subaru is, does not trust him. It's going to be all about Subaru making bonds with people, communicating with people, making mistakes, especially with his childish behavior now and him having a lot of memory loss due to what's going on. It's going to lead to him making mistakes, but he's going to ultimately build those bonds with people, build a community around him, and become a leader of people, is my prediction.
We'll have to see. But for now, I think that's a good place to leave off this phase.
Yep.
Our Amelia camp has returned.
Woo!
We should be seeing the rest of the Abel camp coming back from Chaos Flame with all of Chaos Flame's population to a now ruined city.
Yep, that's going to not cause problems at all, right?
Yeah, hopefully Otto as Internal Affairs Minister will be able to handle all of this. But we will have to wait and see until next time. This has been the Reeve Zero Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you then.
Goodbye.
Bye. Bye-bye.